what do people think brainwashing is? Like, what do people label as brainwashing when they see it?
I'd say advertising, things like that, but it's like stuff forced into your mind that you don't really want. It's like that Apple commercial. Remember from way back in the day, and they're all like people just looking at the screen, and then that lady comes in and saves, or whatever. They come in and throw the hammer or the hatchet or whatever that is. That's what I think of with brainwashing, because I got brainwashed by that commercial to think that.
Isn't it just like, okay, here's one perspective. Isn't it just like anytime you see a group of people believing in something, that's not what your belief is?
That's what I was thinking.
So you're looking at more from the perspective of like
when people be like, "Whoa, they're exactly." Yeah. Now there's a couple of different perspectives, because there's also like, what does the word brainwashing mean? Like, don't you want to wash things?
Well, I took it as like, I think it's from the documentary called War, or when you look at the stuff that the CIA had done, like MK Ultra and all that stuff, where they would do things to basically screw people's brains up so bad, because they were trying to figure out, can we rewrite people's personality? You know, what can we do? So they'd push it to the limit. Then you see some of the stuff of those people that they would like dose with extreme amounts of LSD or do the electroshock therapy, where it's like they're washing. I took that as they're like washing out the brain, so it's just a blank slate, and then I don't know, you could put whatever you want in there.
That's pretty
theoretically.
Now, how do you think like how does the actual brainwashing happen? Where is it happening?
What do you mean by actual brainwashing?
As in the thing that people are afraid of what brainwashing is? When people are like, oh, I don't want to get brainwashed, or those people are brainwashed. What are they talking about, and where is that actually happening in society?
Like basically being confused, like essentially believing something that's not in your best interest and going along with that. How does that happen? Is that what you're saying?
It's a good point. It's like, to break that into like more layman's terms, of like the point of people just say that when there's a group of people who have beliefs that are different from theirs, and they can see the direct correlation of where those beliefs came from. Like, oh, it came from that person, therefore you're all brainwashed from that person. But what if that person isn't like one singular person? It's like a medium of exchange, as in you got brainwashed by, now it's totally out there that like, and if you don't know this yet, then damn, but like it's totally out there that YouTube is like a completely democratic platform.
Oh yeah.
Is that fair to say?
I mean, YouTube, Twitter, all the
Facebook.
big tech giants. Yeah.
So what about before, this year?
The word democratic is brainwashing.
Right. Yeah. It's just
democratic, but what does the word democratic actually mean?
Right. Like blue is a more accurate.
Brainwashing.
Like, Democratic Party.
More brainwashing.
Democratic
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just
you're right.
pointing out how it's like these words that we use are also part of the brainwashing.
That's what Tulsi Gabbard says. She's like, I want to make she's like, I want to run as a Democratic, and part of my goal is to make the Democratic Party democratic. It's like what they purport themselves as is not at all what it actually is. And this is what everybody says about cults and brainwashing, all that stuff, is when you're in it, you can't see it. Right? So it's like, in terms of all of us, because I know each one of us, we had to work through a bunch of brainwashing, right? Like a bunch of beliefs that we assumed was best for us, a bunch of beliefs that we assumed was like, this just makes sense, let's just go along with it. But where did we get that from? And I think we should just come at it from every angle. So Cameron, what perspective were you thinking of when you were thinking of, I guess, how far we can take this podcast?
Well, we'll get to that. Start with that. But
we have to build to that.
But I was just looking on Wikipedia, the word brainwashing, like to see where it comes from. And actually, now that I'm looking at it, I realize I've seen this before. But it says that
it used to be like they would put a saline solution on your brain. They would literally
that's right. We talked about that.
Yeah, they would wash like lesions off of your brain or something where I guess it was like people having seizures or some kind of medical condition like that.
That was like the first time the word had been used, I think. But then it says the term brainwashing was first used in English. I don't know. You never know if everything's totally legit in here, but basically it says brainwashing is said to reduce its ability to think critically or independently, to allow the introduction of new unwanted thoughts and ideas into their minds, as well as to change their attitudes, values, and beliefs. And I guess when they first started using the word, was trying to describe how the Chinese government was in the 50s was trying to force people, their citizens, to accept the government propaganda or whatever. But it's cool because, you know, like if this was any other video on YouTube talking about propaganda, maybe somebody might go somewhere kind of where we're going with it. But it's like, but not really, because generally speaking, most people are not going to be totally self-honest about it. It's like everyone has their bias and then they won't go past it, you know? But how is there a person on this planet who's not brainwashed?
Yeah.
I mean, even for example, just, okay, I'll give you an example. Like with my daughter the other day, Seneca, and she's almost 2. And we were looking at some toys, or I forget what it was exactly, but we were looking at something. And she picked something up and she was like, you know, red. And I'm like, yeah, that is red. And then she picked up another one and she said some color. I think she said green, but it was kind of like more like a light blue sort of a color or something like that. And I was like, well, that's actually a blue. That's more of a blue color. And I was like looking at it in that moment of, somebody else could tell her it's a different color. Do you know what I mean? Like I could have just said it was blue, but then I was like, it's like a light blue.
Or you could have said it was green. You should be like, yeah, you're right.
Or I could have said green, but the point is, like, I could have just said blue. I could have said light blue. I could have said turquoise, or, you know, I don't remember what the actual color was, right? But teaching children the names of things is brainwashing. Because, like, okay, for example, how do you know this thing is red?
You were taught that.
Yeah,
You got brainwashed.
Yeah.
Like, and then it's like our mind accepted it, and then from that moment on, unless specific intervention and correction was created, like, it's gonna be that color. That's what you know it as, you know.
Yeah.
And with that in particular, there's maybe not any like real emotional value towards it, but imagine there's something where it's like something that you're doing, a behavior, and your parents are like, no, don't do that, you shouldn't do that, and you feel guilty about it. Like, that behavior is forever defined as guilt, and not, you shouldn't do it, you know. Like, you're brainwashing them into having a certain perspective and belief and attitude towards certain things. Like, that's when a children comes into this world, they don't know anything. You literally have to. And if I say brainwash, people are gonna be, well, you're saying you should brainwash children? It's like, no, what I'm saying is everything of how you learn is brainwashing.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's just that we're thinking it's negative, and it can be used in a negative way. Now, if we're only defining brainwashing as the negative way, then obviously, then I guess that wouldn't be brainwashing. But when you look at the definition, it reduces a subject's ability to think critically or independently. Well, if you tell somebody what things are, how are they thinking independently anymore?
That's a cool point. Before we get too deep into it, like, just based on the point that you had brought up as far as where other people might go with what brainwashing is, right? Where we're looking at, okay, if someone were to disagree with brainwashing and they say, no, I'm not brainwashed, I have my own thoughts. It's like, you don't have your own thoughts. You don't know where your thoughts even come from. You don't know, well, just even the ability to formulate your thoughts comes from some way of thinking that was given to you, comes from the building blocks of, like, you speak in English, you've been brainwashed in English, you know, or if you speak whatever other language, you've been brainwashed in that language.
Yeah. I think I was talking to Max the other day, or maybe it was Seneca, one of them. And I made that point. I was like, I said something like, you know, well, that's because we speak English. Like, the language we speak is English. And in that moment, I'm like, I'm saying the language we speak. Like, it was almost, I could hear it within myself, almost like we're English speakers. like that. It's like it defines us, as in like it's inherently who we are, but it's not inherently who we are. It's what we were taught. That's why I speak English, not because I'm an English speaker. If you know what I'm trying to say, like it's not inherently who I am. It's something that was given to me, and then now it's just integrated part of me. You know, but it's like that with every belief, every thought, that's why we're so specific. And we talked about before with Max and Seneca, not teaching them like stuff that's totally bullshit, you know, because it's like, what's the purpose of that belief, or that propaganda, if you will? Like the tooth fairy is propaganda. Yeah. It's brainwashing because it's not real. Why did you tell them about it? What was the purpose? How come when their tooth falls out, you can't just be like, all right, your tooth fell out. Another tooth's going to grow in. Like, why does there need to be this other thing about it?
It's like, what purpose does that serve?
Oh,
yeah, exactly.
I want to bring up something.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Ken finish it.
Well, yeah, exactly like what you're saying. It's like, so we're all learning different languages, right? So it's like a form of brainwashing. But if you're going to come up with some belief system instead of just looking at the reality of what happened, how is that going to benefit the child, the individual, the person, whatever it is in the long term? It's like, probably not. Yeah.
Well, and if you teach the child that when you put your tooth under the pillow, this tooth fairy is going to come and then they're going to leave a quarter and they're going to take your tooth. What's the purpose of that? The only thing I can see really happening from that, because the child doesn't really understand the mechanics of that and why it doesn't make sense necessarily. And they don't even necessarily know what a fairy is. It's like, what's a fairy? It's like, I remember one time I was talking to Max, we were looking at a book. I think it was a Where's Waldo thing. And he was like, what are those people? And I was like, oh, those people are called pirates. And he's like, what's a pirate? So I was like, well, a pirate. Okay. So I looked at all the context I have for why that is a pirate. So I explained to him why those people are called pirates. But then I explained to him what the word pirate means. Like, you know, you can pirate music, you know, it's beyond just that thing. We have pirates today. So you can't just be like, oh, those were these things a long time ago. We had like, they're still pirates, you know, we call them pirates, and, you know, Somalian pirates and stuff like that, you know? So you start looking at how, by the way you speak to a child, it's like you're forcing them now into this particular way of looking at things, and they're not knowing about things you're not telling them about, for example. So you're starting to narrow the way they think about stuff. So they're not going to be thinking independently anymore. You know what I mean? And if you're telling them stuff about how the tooth fairy is going to leave a quarter and all this stuff, it's like, what purpose does that serve other than that the child thinks, oh yeah, because I don't know if this is a part of the normal standard tooth fairy thing, but it was this book that we read. And she said, the way they did it in the story, it was you put your tooth under the pillow and then you make a wish and your wish will come true. That was their version of it. It's like
a quarter. You don't get a quarter.
No. You just wish. And in the story, at the end of the story, the girl gets an ice cream cone. That's what she wished for, even though she lost her tooth. And then she gets another, like a feather she finds, and she makes a wish on that. And at the end of the story, she gets a feather, or an ice cream cone rather. And it's like, so what is that story encouraging? That you just wish for things. So when we first read it, I asked Max, I was like, okay, hold on. I said, does this make sense? And he's like, what do you mean? I said, like, if you just wish for, like, what does it mean to wish? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, in the context of the story, what it means is you just thinking about something that you really want and hoping that you'll get it and thinking about it and wanting it really bad, like a lot. And then it's supposed to happen. And I'm like, is that how things actually happen? And he was like, no. And I'm like, if you wanted a sandwich, what would be better, if you wish for it or if you tell Katie or I? And he's like, well, I'll tell you, right? Because then we can go get it, or you can learn how to make the sandwich. I'm like, but how is wishing gonna, because then in the story, it emphasizes that it has to be a secret wish and you can't tell anybody. So what is that teaching the child? You should have things you keep secrets from your parents even, and from everybody, because you really want it. And I said to Max, I'm like, if you really want something, wouldn't it make sense to tell people about it rather than trying to keep it secret? I mean, I said it would depend on the context, right?
Like isn't that what pedophiles do?
Right? Yeah. Don't tell anybody. Exactly. So it just sets your thinking up to not function effectively. So consider this. Here's what I'm looking at. If you can think effectively, how can you be brainwashed in the negative sense? Like if you have full ability over yourself to look at the logic behind things, and you have no desires that are not best, how could you ever be tricked in being brainwashed into something? Well, okay, here's a perfect example. People get brainwashed all the time by religion, yeah?
Mhm.
Why? What's their desire?
To get to heaven, feel good,
Right, because what are they afraid of?
dying.
Right. So because they have a fear, someone can promise them something and they don't understand the mechanics of how it happens. And they're so afraid. They're like, if it makes me feel good about this, I'll accept it. So who's actually the one doing the brainwashing?
They are to themselves.
Yeah, they're brainwashing themselves. Exactly.
But consider this. Why is it they can't see through logically that it doesn't make sense?
Because they don't want to see that part.
But
Like,
what if
they're
no one
also-
ever taught them how to actually think properly?
Yeah,
Like, had a reason.
Like, what if they got brainwashed from a young age to believe that things can happen even though they don't logically make sense just because you want them to?
Yeah.
Because somebody told them the story about the fucking tooth fairy or whatever.
and Santa
So
Claus and
who
all this bullshit.
so who brainwashed them originally?
Like if you pretend to be a good person,
Parents.
which is Santa Claus. If you act good, if you're a good person, if you're in the nice books, you get whatever the fuck you want. You just have to like low key send a letter to Santa bullshit. Like I'll send it for you though. You know, like give it to mama, I'll put it in the mailbox.
And then also what parents do is they use that to be like, well, if you don't behave, I'm going to tell Santa.
Yeah, that's fucked.
Because who can you not negotiate with?
Someone doesn't exist.
They can't
Oh,
they can't
shit.
be like, you know, like my son, if I'm like, no, we're not going to do that and here's why, and he's like, well, no, I really want to do it, and he's like trying to convince me. There's only me. Like he's got to talk to me and I got to talk to him, and I'm not going to, neither one is going to let it go until it's resolved. So I can't be like, well, look, it's out of my hands, buddy. Like I told Santa already, I'll tell him. You can't argue with him. I'll just tell Santa you're being naughty. Hey,
Like, fuck,
they're
I'm
like,
sorry.
oh, shit,
I wish
okay,
I could
fuck,
fix
fuck,
that.
fuck, fuck.
Yeah.
That's a
There's
really
no way they can get access to Santa.
That's a really good point. I've been working with this child. She's like 3 years old. And when she doesn't get, like when she asks for something, if I were to say, well, no, we're not going to do that, and start giving her an explanation, her immediate response is to just pout, put her hands, you know, across her chest and stand like far away from me and give me like this look. And
That's so
and I just
cute.
started explaining to her like, well, hey, why don't you come over here? Why don't we talk? Why don't you tell me what you want? And I'll explain to you if it's possible or not and why. But she's been essentially brainwashed to believe that if she just pouts, and it must work for her on some level because she does it a lot. If she just pouts and doesn't respond and doesn't even acknowledge that there could be a middle ground, she'll get the way that she wants. She'll get what she wants, right? And I, of course, I'm not like, I'm not giving into that.
You ain't no bitch. You ain't no bitch to no kid.
But it's really interesting to see that on some level you have to be taught that in order to act in that way. You have to be taught, even if your normal response or natural response is to pout, to do that so often, someone has to actually acquiesce and give in and not support you to then come back and say, hey, look, why don't we talk this out? Like, is that going to support her then to reason as an adult and actually be able to have an open dialogue with people that she disagrees with, you know, which is really what we're seeing really take place today, especially, you know, in our media and just in the streets and everything, is that people are not open to hearing anything in slight opposition. I could even tell her like, hey, look, we're just not going to do it in that way. We'll do, you know, what she's basically asking for, but we're not going to do it in that way. We're going to do it in this other way. And immediately she'll go into pouting. And it's like, that's what I'm seeing today, as soon as you start to say something in opposition to how somebody feels and how they think, they immediately clam up and they're like, nope, not listening. Don't want to hear you. Nope, your point is invalid. You're evil. You're a racist. You're whatever it is, right? I don't know where I was going with that, but I just saw that. Whoa, here's where I was going with it. You're actually supporting Max to be able to make decisions rationally. It's that point that you made, essentially, of how can these people go into religion and just accept it because they're not thinking critically, they're not thinking logically. Why would that be? Because they're not supported at a young age, just like so many people are not supported to understand, okay, look, Tooth Fairy doesn't exist, Santa Claus not real, sorry, it's me, I put the presents under your tree, until like they're 7 years old. And by that time you've lied to them for 7 years, and now they're all of a sudden, it's like, wait, what? Like my whole last 7 years has been a lie. In fact, I remember this for myself. I was never taught that Santa was real or anything, which was cool on my mom's part. She was very straight up about it. Like, look, I buy the presents. I don't have money this year. You're not getting it. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Don't ask, but I'll get you something later. I was like, all right, that's cool, you know? But I remember as an adult having that experience of, wait a minute, everything that I believed as far as religion and how I structured my entire life based on this specific religion and these specific tenets and all of those things, wait a minute, all that is not, that doesn't make sense. Like as I started learning more about it and actually diving deep into it, learning about other religions, that kind of thing, and just seeing the world not from this initial starting point of everything has to fit into this religious ideology, then I started to have an experience of like, I guess you could say like an existential crisis of like, whoa, my whole life has meant nothing up until this point. Wow. Everything that I've done has been from that starting point. And I missed out on so many things that I actually wanted to do, that I could have been doing, that I could have been experiencing, or just living my life in a completely different way, where I would be closer to where I actually want to be, even just from listening to all these people that I realized also then, like, they don't fucking know. They have no clue. They're just as lost as I am. And having that realization that late, it was a terrible feeling. And so I can imagine how a child feels after they've realized you as their protector, their guide, the one who's bringing them into this world and supposed to be teaching them everything, has been lying to them this whole time. And it's not something that's like small even. That's something that you've built a lot of emotional value to. And then just boom, take it away from them. How do they then function as adults later on? How can they even trust themselves? Yeah. They can't trust you. How can they trust themselves in everything that you've given them?
Like, no wonder people are so afraid of being brainwashed.
Yeah, because they were, and they experienced like the negative consequences of it.
They're like, fuck, red flag, brainwashing. Like, they're brainwashed, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's because they don't trust their ability to reason.
Exactly. Because
they
got
rely
duped.
on,
and for good reason.
Well, what I'm saying is not just because they got duped. I agree with you. But what I'm saying is they actually can't reason.
Yes, as in, so like, I don't trust myself to be able to see through bullshit.
So if somebody's really persuasive, I'm gonna get trapped by it.
Yeah.
But then they're not really even considering what they're accepting right now, because what they've been brainwashed with from a young age, it's a fact. And then it's just anything contradicting that would be considered brainwashing. Not looking through their own points. And that's like, when we talk about being self-honest, forgiving yourself, correcting yourself, that's the point, is to now go and realize it's not about we're not brainwashed, everyone else is. It's like everyone's brainwashed. Now you got to go and realize, okay, a computer can't work if it's not programmed. So your mind isn't going to be able to, you're not going to be able to function in reality if you don't speak a language with other human beings when everyone else is speaking a language right now. So it's not like, I don't want to be brainwashed at all. It's just a matter of what is actually practically best for you in the environment that you're in. And then within the context also of changing the environment so that it's best for everybody, including yourself. So it's not about whether you should be brainwashed or not. And that's the problem, is this happens in many different ways. People will project onto something that they perceive as bad, but then really use that to not look at how they're actually participating in it themselves or contributing to it or accepting it over in another area of their life. So the brainwashing is just another example of that, where, you know, even on the Republican side, they say that the left is brainwashed and all this stuff, but they're also brainwashed. Like, they also believe that if everybody just works hard and stuff, then everyone has an opportunity to succeed in this country. And it's like, no, only 1%. That's how the system is designed. That doesn't mean we should just tear it down and not have anything, but we should also be honest about what are the actual problems and so forth, right? But again, that's part of the brainwashing. We accept things at such a fundamental level in this world that are clearly not working for everybody. And if you think that it's just the media doing it, well, and it's not just the media, like, it's a more fundamental problem. It's going to ultimately come back to hurt you too. You see what I mean? So a lot of people in this world don't have what they need. They're going to get pissed off. And you can yell at them, the media is brainwashing. The media is brainwashing you. But why are they getting brainwashed by the media then? That must mean they're stupid. Well, that's your fault then. If everybody else in the world is stupid, you didn't do anything about it.
Brainwashing is believing that the government can't give everybody $5,000 a month during Corona time because of inflation.
Yeah.
I was just having that conversation with someone yesterday where we were just looking at how it seems so impossible for most people that the government could hand out money and have like something like a universal basic income, right? But then when you ask somebody, well, where does money come from, right? People will say, well, from your job. Okay, cool. Where does the job get money?
Your boss is like, all right, guys, let me get my money tree on.
Exactly. I'm like, where does the company get the money from? Oh, from the products that they sell and services and things. Okay, so they sell this product. Where did the people who are paying for the product get the money from? From their jobs. Okay, so it's just like a cyclical thing.
Chicken or egg.
Yeah, it's just going in circles, really. So where did it originate from is really the question. And it's almost as if people think that money comes into the system and then it evaporates out somewhere. Like, it just goes away, it just disappears. And like, oh, now we've got, big problems because we'll never see that money again. It's not going to come back. It's not like it goes into that company and then it never comes back into the people at all.
But like in Canada and the US, they gave everybody money, right? I know they did it in Canada too, right?
Yeah,
I think even more so than in
2K.
the US.
Yeah, 2K.
Like every
and
month,
they got on
right?
it right away. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Why didn't it cause inflation?
Because people were using it.
Because everybody's
like, isn't the argument that if everybody gets all this money, they'll just raise the prices of all the products? That's inflation, right? The money is less valuable. How come that didn't happen?
I don't know. I mean, maybe there's like a time delay.
Well, they didn't raise the price of everything, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying. And I don't notice anything's different.
Yeah.
Just haircuts.
Nothing that's substantiated where it's like, well, that was literally like giving us a penny. That didn't do anything. I still can't even buy this piece of bread.
Right.
They didn't do that.
Right.
So wouldn't that just imply that, like, the idea of inflation, I'm not saying inflation can't happen, but it would be it would be on purpose. Meaning if you run the system to a certain degree, like where you can influence it, you can say it's okay for inflation to occur here, or it's not okay. You know what I mean? You could make a law that says nobody can raise their prices. Like, unless it's justified by that money is going to X, Y, or Z. You know what I mean? Where it's an actual legitimate point. You're not just raising the price because people have there's more money supply. So, like, what I'm thinking is it didn't happen because if it happened, if the businesses who are struggling did that, then they wouldn't be able to actually make any money. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, if all the prices were raised and then no one could actually afford, if the money wasn't invaluable, then it wouldn't actually make the businesses any money. They would just be like, that was pointless. You see what I mean? They would put themselves out of business.
As in, if everybody were in agreement, hey, let's not raise our prices, then there would be no inflation.
Right, exactly. Or even if everyone was just in agreement in principle, it didn't have to even be an explicit agreement.
Right,
I
right.
don't see why per se inflation has to be inevitable.
Mhm.
You know, and there's all kinds of arguments, and you can watch Ray Dalio, and he goes through all these things, and it's all very complicated and stuff, and it's like, why is it that only some people can be rich? Because you can argue, well, but the ones who make all the money, they do all the stuff and everything, right? But is it proportional to what they actually do? Like, for example, Ray Dalio, right? He's one of the main reasons behind why the Chicken McNugget exists.
You
Who
gotta
did
tell
that
me
help
about
in this?
this.
Who did that help in this world?
McDonald's.
McNugget
Right.
lovers.
And did that somehow
Didn't
become
help them,
everybody is wealthy and everything?
No.
So, because they say, well, but they are the ones who make all the products, and if we didn't have them, da 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 da. And yeah, I agree. In the current system, without them, there wouldn't be anything. Totally, that obviously in the system that we have. But to then argue we can't change things in any way doesn't really make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to say like, no, where we're at is the best it can be, guys. It's the best it can be. But then, okay, well, let's look at all the rioting and all this stuff happening. Isn't that a function of the system being the way it is?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's not, then what's it a function of? Oh, it's just a bunch of brainwashed idiot people. Okay, well, where'd they get brainwashed? The universities. Okay. Well, who runs and gives the endowments to all the universities? All the rich people, these fucking assholes. But aren't those the people that you're saying need to be in society because they make everything happen? And aren't they the ones? It's like,
They're like, all they support is socialism, those crazy kids. Like, what do you support? Capitalism. Where does that money go? Rich people. And they're the reason why.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, so the rich people who give all the money to all the universities are brainwashing them to be socialists. But then you are defending that they should still exist because capitalism is so great. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have any kind of capitalism. I'm just saying, because that's a whole nother
The faulty
discussion.
logic, right? Like the brainwashing.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
People can't
And so
think.
it's not about socialism or capitalism or any of these things. It's just, you see how people then they're just defending this belief they have, but it really just allows them to blame one side and not take any personal responsibility at all whatsoever for it. Right. And then not realizing that they could actually stand up and do something.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
It's
with
like the whole arguing for your own limitation.
Right.
People are just
Right.
brainwashed to do that.
It's
just
like, we
another
can't
argument.
change this world because then I would have to change.
Yeah. And
We
part of the
can't change this world
brainwashing.
because I'm not an extroverted person or whatever.
Yeah, they're like, what if nobody changes?
Yeah. Part of the brainwashing is thinking that there's always going to be huge problems like that. There's always going to be rioting. There's always going to be this. There's always going to be that.
That's a good point.
Well, maybe not. You know. It's like-
It's so true. There's always going to be inequality. There's always going to be racism. You can't fix it. Hey, I wanted to like walk through this point because I don't remember if I think I went through that on a podcast, but we started it in the self-perfected global hangout when I was talking about how the master will whip the slave, right? Or the master will be watching and the manager's whipping the slave, right? When I step out of line, get whipped, step out of line, get whipped. And there comes a time, imagine this, right? Where the manager just like gave the slave the whip. And then anytime the slave like was working and he's like, fuck this, I don't want to work. He whips himself. He's like, get back to work. And he keeps working and he's just like whips himself every time he gets out of line to make sure he keeps working. Okay. Now it's like with the whole Santa Claus thing, right? It's like so parent and child, it happens within the family, right? Or it happens within the family. That's the final point. They might see it in a movie. They might ask parents about it, but it happens when they're very young, before they even understand movies and all that stuff. Before we're very young, right? And so it's like they give this idea. Consider the fact that it's totally made up, and this is proof that our beliefs can actually control us physically, is like they give this idea, put it into the child's head, and then the child believes, oh, there's Santa Claus. There's nice and naughty, right? That's the options, right? Or good or bad, but nice or naughty is how they do it because it's nice alliteration, makes for good songs, all that stuff. It's really it's pretty catchy, right? Naughty or nice, right? It sounds nicer. And so you get programmed to think, okay, I got to be good so I can get the gifts. And then there comes a point where it's like the child's like, the parent's like, oh, I'm going to tell Santa that you did that, so you better like give that back to your sister. because like, you know, to take it away, like Santa wouldn't like that, right? So then eventually the child self-governs. They're like, oh, like you ever thought when you were, okay, everybody here got told Santa Claus? Not Drake, right? Mitchell, did you get told Santa Claus?
Oh yeah.
Okay, Camber, did you have that?
Yeah.
Okay, like, do you guys remember having the thought of like, oh shit, like Santa Claus is watching? Like, not at all.
I didn't have that, but I thought that was like God watching. I had the
This is
same
God
thing. It's
watching.
like the
Jesus was
policeman in the
watching
head.
me.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, and that's what I was going to allude to is like,
Yeah.
we just used Santa Claus in replacement of that. So basically, I remember just being a kid and be like, shit, like, Santa Claus, that could be nice. Okay. And I just remember having that thought, right? Where it's like, oh shit, like Santa Claus is watching. Like, he sees me when I'm sleeping. He knows when I'm awake and shit, right? So he's watching me.
It's like Joe Biden over here.
Right. And so I
See the
started
brainwashing.
I started self-governing, right? Whoosh, keep me in line, do the right thing. And it just comes back to what this thing that Bernard said, right? Because as in, isn't that crazy that we're governing ourselves because some made up authority in our mind? Like we're like, oh, this thing that I created in my mind is like the reason why I should do this or do that. And I don't understand it. I don't understand what it means to be nice, but I know that sharing is nice and not sharing is not nice. So then we just get like manipulated to like give all that shit away. But the main point being Bernard, in one of Bernard's audios, he said, God did not create man. Man created God. I was like, and then he explains that God is just something that we all believe in. And that's the only reason why it exists. That's literally the definition of Santa Claus in all of the movies.
Right.
Like you have to believe, you have to believe, right?
Isn't that the system?
Exactly. That's why I was bringing up the money system. Is like brainwashing is believing that we can't just give everybody money because people are not going to do anything, and like there's going to be inflation and all that stuff. It's like we've created this thing as a society. Like imagine if like the human species was one person, right? And like that wouldn't work. We'd be like zombied, right? But the main point being like we created that, and then we're using it to control ourselves and make sure like most of us is like fucked up. Yeah. Most of us is like imprisoned and like diseased and not working. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I was gonna say we created God, and then because God exists, I'm doing air quotes, then we cannot be God, or we cannot take the responsibility of God. And so there's
always something outside of us that's more responsible.
Exactly.
And I was talking to one person who was like, yeah, but Asif, like everything, these principles that you're saying, right? The principles that would make sense to live by, if you trace it back, it all came from God. But how was that message communicated?
He would have done a much better job, I would think.
But how does humanity always receive messages from God?
Through people.
Through some person.
Yeah, somebody writing it.
Through somebody who was getting a revelation. So, like God would communicate it to Prophet Muhammad through a dream. You know, Abraham, like his voice started talking to him.
And then he cut off his kid's penis.
He's like, this makes sense. God's
that part, I don't know why they throw that part in there. And that's the only part people actually think something you're supposed to do. It's like,
but love your neighbor as yourself.
No, just
There's like all this.
That's how you
about,
prove you're not naughty. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I just kill this goat instead? Yeah. Like
you're not supposed to eat bacon. Not supposed to eat.
Y'all
all this
know the
other
story
shit.
of Isaac, right? I think it was Isaac, right, where he had his son, and God told him to sacrifice his child. So he like literally, I think it's Isaac. I could be wrong on the names, but it was in the beginning of the Bible, and he like literally has his kid there on the altar, and God's
Abraham.
like, "Okay, cool, you passed the test, no big deal."
Abraham.
Don't have to actually, yeah, Abraham. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, how is that
what
not?
The fuck?
Okay, so I was going to add this one point. The what you were talking about earlier, it's like when you write a computer program, you can write a program that has a certain functionality, but then you can change the variables. So it's like you could just put a different variable in, and then it's the same program. It does the same thing, but it's a different set of variables, so it's going to produce a result that looks maybe different, but fundamentally it's the same operation, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the same thing. It's like when you taught about Santa Claus, it's like downloading a program that you just switch out the variable name.
Oh,
It's
wow.
God. It's
Yeah.
it's the Federal Reserve. It's fucking
The
whatever.
government,
You see what I mean?
yeah.
It is the same, but you're accepting that program as a valid way that reality works. You accept that there's things that just are way outside of your control, and you just have to accept it, and it's all a plan, and it's all just fine, and that's just the way it is. You don't question it, right? And that's one of the big things. I think y'all guys maybe saw that Tim Pool podcast recently, where they're talking about
Oh man,
about Trump. What did you see the one where they were talking about how he like kind of has broken the left and right paradigm?
Oh yeah.
Because he won't start new wars.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's one of those programs. Like the elite, so to speak, they always have wars to destroy capital. Like there can't be everything gets better and better and better. We always have to collapse it. There has to be a war. We have to destroy things and start over and then go again and so forth. Right. But they just use up all the people on the planet to do all that stuff. They don't actually go fight the wars. Right. And so it's like one of those things where it's because he's not going, that's one of the things he's not going along with is like, he's got to be bad. Therefore he's got to be terrible. You know what I mean? And so the same people who you would think would be totally anti-war are like attacking him because he didn't want to stay in Syria or whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
but there's like this. So what happens is we can run a program, makes sense to us because we've accepted that program. But the purpose of it is just so that we can be manipulated by someone else. And I think that's what people are afraid of when it comes to the brainwashing. You know what I mean? But they're not willing to question how literally everything you do has been brainwashed into you. And then also, like, your parents didn't know what they were doing. None of what they did was deliberate.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, that means they just were transferring their brainwashing onto you. And the person and their parents weren't deliberate. So at what level is someone taking responsibility? That's the systems. Because who came up with the story of Santa Claus? Why did it become a thing? Why did it become something that people talk about all the time in America? Were the Pilgrims doing Santa Claus?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Were the Native Americans doing Santa Claus?
No, they definitely weren't.
It's like somebody was, and then they transferred it, and then it became a universal thing. But it fits perfectly into consumerism. It also fits perfectly into believing in the system, all those things that, you know, Asif was mentioning. But, you know, do you guys ever see, there's this documentary, I don't remember what it's called or anything, but I look it up. But it's about how, or maybe, I was gonna say, maybe it's that Adam ruins everything. But it's either him or something. Anyways, I think he did something on this.
I hope you don't consider him like a documentary. That's terrible.
No, I'm not saying it's a documentary. I'm just saying it was something I saw that made me look further into it.
I'm
right?
just giving you shit.
No, I know. He's got it's a lot of propaganda, right?
Yeah.
But my point is, there was something I saw about how engagement rings as diamonds like became a thing. So it's like when we think about it, you're like, okay, if you're going to propose to your girlfriend, obviously you get her a diamond engagement ring, right?
Right.
But why do we think that? Why is that? Like, and if somebody was like, oh, I didn't get my girlfriend a diamond engagement ring, I got her this bracelet that, you know, really means something to me, or I handmade her this chest of drawers, or I don't know, like whatever, something that you decided to do out of your own creativity. People will be like, oh, couldn't afford a diamond ring, huh? You know,
Right.
Oh, your fiance didn't give you a diamond ring. Like, oh yeah. Who do you think came up with the whole idea that diamonds is the symbol of engagement?
Somebody who owned a diamond mine.
Advertising company had a diamond business. Yeah.
De Beers, right?
Yeah.
The
Oh.
fucking diamonds. Yeah. It was
Of course.
okay. Why do you think people eat bacon? It was like it was the shit that people threw away at some point, according to the sources and the documentaries and everything. It was like the part that they couldn't get rid of. And then they started putting it in a certain place and kind of marketing it differently. And then suddenly it became like this big thing. Right?
Hey, real quick to add to that, like another example of that is Oliver. Oliver is a vegan. You guys know Oliver, right, in South Francisco?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not vegan or vegetarian, but he was making a good point with like, why do you think everybody started drinking milk and all that? Like, why did milk become such a like staple, milk and cookies and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And the whole, it's just the marketing of got milk, like everything became milk centered to sell milk. But he's like, that's
Okay,
not
on the same
really good.
token, you're right, but look at soy milk. Same thing.
Right, exactly. It just
Everything
marketed.
is some kind of marketing and somebody, but then we take it for granted. It's just like, well, that's just the way it is. Of course you have. Remember, there wasn't soy milk a long time ago, like when we were kids. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't exist, but it wasn't like you go to anybody's.
I didn't know it existed.
You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. Like it wasn't a thing, and now it's a thing. It's there within, and it's
almond milk,
gluten free. You know, like, and I'm not particularly criticizing or advocating any of those points. I'm just saying, like, you can see how ideas can be introduced. I mean, it's not like a secret that marketing is brainwashing, right? But then, if people are really actually afraid of brainwashing, why don't we outlaw marketing?
As in Cameron, you were talking in one of your videos, one of your personal Facebook videos, like, you're mentioning this point of abuse of billboards, and someone said to me, like, why do people even do billboards? They don't work. Like, how do billboards work? How would you explain billboards work? Because I don't think everybody sees all forms of advertising. I think we just think of commercials as advertising.
Yeah. Well, I don't understand why they would say billboards don't work.
Obviously,
So how would
billboards work?
I don't know, because I'm not like in the business of billboards or using them, so I haven't done the research to know whether they quote work or not. But I would think that if they didn't work at some level in terms of what the person was looking for, no one would do it. Right. And maybe some people who are stupid would do it, but you wouldn't think major corporations would do it. So perhaps it's just impulsing you with their brand being in your subconscious, and it's just you accept it. Maybe it's not like you're going to go see that billboard and go buy something. I think that's probably what the person meant. Like, I've never seen a billboard just gone to buy something. It's like, maybe that wasn't targeted towards you, but also you don't know at what level it influenced you in some way.
I have seen a billboard and gone and bought something.
I mean,
like something like driving down the highway and there's an advertisement for this certain kind of food. I'll go and stop. Like, if I'm doing a road trip, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, look, there's a McDonald's. Cool.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
Well, even if you talked about it to like one of your friends and then they went and bought something, like, some people probably are measuring that.
Or even if it's just in your subconscious, which is like, in the event that you needed to go purchase that product, you would automatically more be steered towards the one that was in there symbolically, just because it's the one you trust, because it seems to resonate with you, because it's in your subconscious now. It's like in your programming, because it got in there every day. So it's not necessarily trying to get you to go take action, but it's constantly there as a presence. Because I would think if someone like if Coca-Cola never did any of that, no one would drink it. You know what I mean? I don't think they're going to rely just on people giving it to their kids. You know, they need to maintain that sort of in your presence all the time.
But
sort of
if
attitude.
we kind of go back to subliminal messaging, right? It's like they flash the Coke or popcorn or whatever, right? Or let's say it was Coke. I think Coke used that advertising, or Pepsi or whatever. Subliminal messaging in movie theaters. That only works as in, I don't think a billboard would work on its own, but when I've already shown you commercials to subconsciously connect that image with a feeling of like thirst and quench and like sweat and relief and like this good feeling of party in summer, and then I show that image out of your awareness.
But also, when you're driving down the road, isn't it very quick?
Yeah.
It's like when you're walking down an aisle and you're not looking for cereal, but all the cereal boxes are going by you, isn't it like basically programming you? So it's and they imagine if you're the company and you know on average, because you can test with eye tracking and all this stuff, like in the periphery, how long that image stays in your eye, and then design the packaging on purpose to be in some way visible or to get into your subconscious. So, and they do the research on it. Like, these companies spend so much money. That's why you can't just go compete with these companies, because you would just try to do it based on your ideas, and it's not going to work.
And one of the points of that I want to make, and I think we can talk about this at a political scale too, is how the only reason that works, as in, why would diamond shreddies be more appealing than shreddies?
What is that?
Like, do you guys know what shreddies is? It's like a square, like wheat kind of.
Okay, we have that. We just don't call it that, but yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So it's like shreddies. It could be like honey.
I just call it garbage, but yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But I just call it in my trip. No, I'm kidding.
It's just a square, right? And
Yeah.
they had probably the most brilliant marketing I've ever seen, because as a child, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand marketing. So I didn't understand why they would do that unless it was actually something functionally different. But what they did is they took the square. It's just like a, a wheat kind of thing. And they rotated it. And they said,
Yeah.
all new diamond shreddies, right? Like, why would that influence you at all? About physically putting the word diamond in the name. Like,
Yeah.
why did they call it like rhombus shreddy? Right? It's like, in terms of billboards or advertising or politics or media, it requires that you go through some brainwashing process prior, and then they are triggering that point, right? As in, that's what I was saying with the billboards, is like, they already have to make the connection between this image and this feeling, because they know that you act on feelings.
Yeah.
So then I just show this image, and then it brings up the feeling. But the way they get the feeling and the image into you is with commercials, is with movies, right? James Bond smoking a cigarette, or, just drinking a Coke real quick, like whatever the case may be.
And there's always some kind of sexual aspect too. Like, you've seen probably those things where they show, like in these ads, how there's like sexual imagery in there, even though you didn't notice it, And it's like, people think, oh, that doesn't really work. And it's like, it does work though, because your brain, especially as a male, but also as female, it's like kind of in a way wired to look for that stuff.
Mhm.
It's like, have you ever been scrolling through your phone and then your eye catches some like female figure and you're like, oh, and then you're like, oh dude, that's a guy. And you're like, just because of the way it looked. It's like your brain's looking for that stuff. You see what I mean? It's like, so they understand that, like, especially that it elicits a very like sort of primal desire response. And then whatever the words are, or the other image or the brand or whatever, is also getting associated with that every time.
And have you ever heard like somebody describe something as like, okay, describe something as sexy, like an inanimate out, like a car as sexy?
Yeah.
Like, okay, or you think of the red Coke bottle dripping with like sweat, but it's not sweat. It's just like condensation.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a sleek, that's a sexy bottle. Like, that's a, it's like, what?
And it was designed
how can a
on
car
the
be
female,
sexy?
It was designed on the female form too. You
Right.
probably know that.
And that's what I would tell people. I'm like, why do you think the bottle's like, I used to think, let's say the standard Coke glass bottle, right? Or even Sprite, right? The plastic bottle, it's curved, all that. I used to think it was for grip. I used to think, because there was at a point where, Nestle Pure Life, all the bottles used to just be like a triangular at the top, and then it just comes straight down. And they have those ripples in it. But then there's the Nestle Pure Life bottle, and it kind of did this thing. And I was like, oh, it's for grip. Like, obviously for grip. That's why the Coke bottle's like, it's for grip. But then I learned from an advertising, they did a TED Talk, marketing advisor or whatever. And they're like, that has to do with hip to waist ratio. Right. And if we see that in a woman, it's like more attractive, the quote unquote hourglass figure. And I was like, why the fuck did I think that was for grip? You know what I mean? But it still makes sense as to why I would think it's for grip, because I'm not aware of how I'm being programmed, how I've been brainwashed.
It's like those infomercials, where like they have like, they're like, this guy's like trying to drink and it's like, whoo, and they're like, there's got to be a better way. And it's like, for centuries, glasses just did not work, and we need grips on our bottles now, because we just cannot, when you're running and you're literally about to catch that touchdown pass and you're trying to take that sip of the Sprite, you need to make sure it doesn't slip out of your hand, right?
Hey, it's your girl Kathy.
Right. So yeah, it's fascinating, because there's so much within advertising that is so sinister in terms of its deceptiveness, exploiting your programming. And yet no one really seems to have a major problem with it, not enough to make a big deal of it. And then they'll claim that like racism is the big problem. I say they, I just mean that's what's being claimed right now. It's like a big thing, like it's racism, it's this, it's that, it's whatever. And it's like, what about the fact that children are being brainwashed with like alcohol and things like that at a young age and so forth?
Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Drake?
I just read Booker T. Washington's autobiography called Up from Slavery.
Booker T. Washington's book.
Yeah. And he was born into slavery, right? And this guy went on to create the Tuskegee Normal School, which I had to look up what a normal school was, but it's basically a school to teach teachers, right?
Oh,
But
cool.
he made this school in order to teach other Black people how to become teachers, but his real motive behind it was to teach people to value themselves in everything that they do. And so people wanted to come in and they wanted to learn like, oh, let me just learn some Greek or some Latin or some, weird, obscure, like, let me just learn this kind of banking or whatever, right? But he noticed you don't even have a bank account, or you don't know how to manage your finances, or you don't even know really basic things about just planting seeds in the ground so that you can grow your own food. And he was teaching people how they can start using the resources that they have around them just to build value and to become valuable themselves, and then go out into other communities and be the point of value so that people needed to do business with them, right? And this was his way. And he got acknowledged by the president, by the queen, by, not that any of that's super important, but what he was doing was actually making a difference. It was actually having an impact, and it was actually solving race relations back in the 1800s. But then someone else came after him and said, yeah, no. He's just basically trying to get you to work and continue working. And so then they came with this idea of like, we just need people who represent us in these parts of the government and CEOs who are Black and things like that, and just changing the whole narrative. And so, I'm seeing it from the perspective of, if we were to have continued on that path, things might be a lot different than the way that they turned out. But the ideas that we hold today are still those same ideas from this person that said, no, that sounds, he did okay, but I have a better solution. And yet still nothing has come of that.
If everybody has a business,
yeah,
why would anyone go and join the military?
Right. Yeah.
And then there wouldn't be anybody to do the wars.
Yeah.
And why do they want wars? Again, because it destroys capital, it resets all the economic points, it gets rid of lots of people and so forth, and the elite just stay where they're at, and they finance on both sides anyways. And it's like, they made a really cool point in that podcast we were talking about earlier with Tim Pool and all that I don't know if they said it like this, but it's like things were kind of hijacked in America, and so there was all these people like you were talking about that have these solutions, and it's like, it makes sense, but unless you can educate the adults who are educating the children so that they educate their children differently, nothing's going to change. And the system, the people who have influence and so forth in the system know this. That's why the universities and so forth are such a big point of like all of these points. And now it's going down into the lower levels, like middle school and elementary, and it's invading everything, where it's like they're just getting children to think about, instead of like you were saying, okay, so what value can you add in this world? What skills can you develop? They're rather focusing on, okay,
oh, shit, I'm white. That means I'm
who's
racist.
more oppressed than the other person? What's your sexuality, gender, and stuff? And it's like, those are things that should be talked about at home. And there's this whole idea now. It's fascinating because on the one hand, you have the people who say you don't need the government at all, but they don't have a solution for how to educate everybody who is relying on the government. But then you have the people who are saying we need to have a systematic way of educating children, so that's why we need the government and things like that. But then things that they want the government to educate the children on are not things that would empower them to not rely so much on the government. So you can see the level, the influence of the politicians and so forth, who are there to just keep the system in place. They're not really looking at what's best for everybody. And the whole thing is just a big, giant fuck up. That's why, like, when we started Technotutor, we realized we're not trying to focus on going and changing the school system.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's by design doing something that isn't best. That's not going to change. It's like I say, going to a sweatshop and telling them and trying to put on like a how to become an entrepreneur workshop for the sweatshop workers. Like, why would the manager of the sweatshop or the owner like ever agree to that? It'd be like, why would you do
like how to
that?
take full responsibility and get your own money
Right.
from other
Especially
sources?
especially when it's like, well, you're not going to have time to sit in school or in the sweatshop because you're going to have to be out there focused on building a business. So I mean, it's going to actually pull your focus away from that. It's going to require the people to not focus on this other point. Did you guys see this thing I posted in the chat window?
Yeah.
Dude.
I just came across this the other day, and I just thought it was a joke at first, right?
But it's actually
maybe someone
genius.
can explain it to me because I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Hang on. So
Somebody young and hip.
this is my first time seeing this, but you guys know my friend Joey, who, you know, he's been telling me about Travis Scott for a little bit, as far as his influence in just consumerism, let's say.
Was he with
That's
one
a
of the
weird
Kardashians?
interest.
He's with one of the, or he's had a child with one of the Kardashians. I don't know if they're still
Okay.
together or what, how that works out.
What do you mean
But-
by his interest in consumerism?
Okay, so this guy, so he's a rapper or whatever, but if he puts on a piece of vintage clothing, overnight, that vintage apparel will become the most popular thing and be super expensive. So, for instance, if he puts on like a Nike hoodie from like the 90s, where it's got like a small check, then all of a sudden that hoodie goes from being like what you could usually get it for like $20 online, all of a sudden it's $100, like on the regular, you know? And he did a collaboration with some cereal company. I don't remember which one. I think maybe Reese's or something like that. And if you could get your hands on a box of that cereal, which you would go to the store and normally like buy it for like $3 or whatever it is, right? You could still get it for $3 at the store, but it was immediately sold out because it's like a limited release or whatever. And then now if you want to get one of those boxes, you have to get it from like somebody who already has it.
So it's like
and
a
they're selling
resale
it
market.
for like hundreds
Right, it
and
was-
hundreds of dollars.
It is Reese's Puffs.
Okay.
Cactus Jack, is that?
Yeah. So,
What does
so
that
this
mean?
my first time seeing this. I'm sure something similar or something stupid like that is going to
So this is basically, for context for those listening, it's a
And for
meal.
those watching, because we didn't show them anything.
Yeah, I'm not gonna show you guys, but it's a meal at McDonald's that's called the Cactus Jack meal, which is I don't know the background.
The Travis Scott meal.
Oh, it's a Travis Scott meal. Okay, but it has something to do with Cactus Jack. I don't know the whole
True,
context.
I don't know what that is. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's I don't know.
Apparently, it's his record label.
Okay.
Okay. So somehow this has to do with McDonald's eating a meal. And I guess maybe it's like the meal he prefers at McDonald's. I guess. I'm not really sure. I haven't really done the research. I just remember seeing it. It was like, I guess it was probably advertised or somebody retweeted it or something.
Yeah, it says a set list of Travis's 3 McDonald's favorites.
It's
Track
like
one. Quarter pounder with cheese. That sounds like the regular quarter pounder. But it says Travis style. And it says, dive into a quarter pounder with cheese stacked with Travis's go-to toppings. Guess what they are? Bacon and lettuce. It's a
Hold on,
classic
hold on.
made iconic.
Wait, hold on just a second, guys. You're telling me this guy is such a what's the word I'm looking for?
Connoisseur.
Sophisticated gentleman.
No, I mean he's so like forward thinking. He's so ahead of his time. This guy thought to put bacon and lettuce on his quarter pounder.
BL.
Okay.
Wow.
I like it.
Hang
It
on.
says it's a classic made iconic.
Wait, I'm wondering because it says it drops September 8th. Can you not get any of this stuff right now? Like, what's so special about
Like
it?
you go in there and you're like, yeah, I'll have my usual. They're like, what's your usual? I'm sorry, I'm new here. And they're like, it's a quarter pounder with cheese, bacon, lettuce, and then I want to get that medium fries and barbecue sauce in my Sprite with ice. I'd like extra ice. Look, man, I can't give you the extra ice on it. I know, like, it's a Travis meal. We haven't dropped that Hot album yet. Like, I can give you everything else. I just can't. I mean, I would suggest you go with the regular ice because you're probably gonna want the other parts. But if you get that, I can't give you the extra ice also.
Or the
Pre-order?
person's like, oh, wait, are you Travis Scott? Like, wow.
You can buy his
And then it's-
cereal for
you can sign up
$70
for
on
email.
Amazon.
For
$70?
$70.
$70, $69.99. Reese's Puff cereal by Travis Scott.
Okay, not only can
Cheaper
you
than
sign up for
McDonald's.
emails to get more exclusive news from McDonald's and Travis Scott, you can also download their app to stay up to date on all things Cactus Jack. Like, this is, you want to talk about intersectionality? Okay, this is intersectionality. It's like you've got rap and consumerism of clothing and style and everything intersecting with McDonald's meals, and it's like Happy Meals are not enough anymore. This is a $6 Travis Scott meal. What's going to happen next? Is there going to be like a Trump meal? He likes McDonald's, doesn't he?
It'll be the Biden.
I think he
meal.
likes Burger King. I don't know.
I'm going to the Family Fun Hub on this website. I'm like, man, I've never explored this before. Oh,
This is really
boy.
brainwashing at its finest.
Yeah, they got you, Cam. You're
as
in it.
As in, okay, the purpose of a corporation, right? To make profit. That's it, period. And again, same argument for why billboards would work. It's like, I don't think they would do it if it didn't work. They put so much money into marketing and metrics, metric measurement, and seeing what's actually effective and choosing where to spend their dollars. That's where like all the money goes into marketing, right? And not all the money, but a huge portion. And so for them to release this Cactus Jack Travis Scott meal, let's just consider or use the assumption that it actually works. Why the fuck would that work? Why would Reese's Puffs go to why would there be YouTube videos of people taste testing Cactus Jack's Reese's Puffs? Right?
Yeah, they're not the old Reese's Puffs. Yeah, it's like this is a different one, even though they're exactly the same. They just have a different color scheme on the box. It's a cardboard box with sugary fucking dextrose, like fake fucking carbohydrates. It's basically a pile of steaming shit. And you're like, but it says Travis Scott on it.
For those of you who like Reese's,
like,
Cameron's a hater. Like Reese's is dope sometimes.
I wouldn't give it to my children.
I probably wouldn't either.
You know, I wouldn't do that. I don't give them McDonald's. They don't ask me. People think like they're being deprived perhaps of stuff like that. And it's like, they don't care about it. You don't realize how you're influencing them because you're trying to relive something for yourself. You see what I mean? Like the only thing we got for them when they were young was Chick-fil-A. And it was like the one thing because it's chicken and we had all these reasons why. But as soon as Katie started to learn how to cook more effectively and like do a lot more cooking at home, she just started making the chicken nuggets at home. And I went into the kitchen one day because Max was like, I want some of the Chick-fil-A sauce. He was like, can we go to Chick-fil-A and get Chick-fil-A sauce? I'm like, well, we're not going to do that. It's not practical right now. I said, I'll make you some. And he was like, okay. So I just went in the kitchen. I got a bottle of mayonnaise. We have like that veganese stuff, right? Yeah, which I actually like. I didn't think I would, but it's pretty good. This episode is sponsored by veganese. And I put some of that with some of the barbecue sauce that we had and some honey. And I think maybe something else, but I can't remember. And then I just mix it all together. And I was like, here, Max, I made you some Chick-fil-A sauce. Try it. And he goes, oh my God, this is really good. He's like, this is like the real thing. And I was like, I never even tasted it before. Right. And it just seemed like that's what it would be like. It was something like that. Right. And so it was just really cool because he was like, okay, awesome. And then he's fine. I don't even know when the last time they had Chick-fil-A was. But we're not like impulsing it as an emotional thing that you need to do, and it's like you should do it. So it's like we can talk to them and say we're not going to have Chick-fil-A today, because at most we would ever have it is like at most once a week, right? And then if they would ask for it again, which would happen but rarely, we would just talk about it, and we usually would say, well, here's why we're not going to do it. We can get it next week or whatever. But there's never any like in our home with our kids, there's never a you just have to accept this. You know what I mean? Like kind of like, fuck you, you have to accept it. I say so. It's like explaining why. I want
to contrast that with the way fast food was used in our home. And I think, and maybe this was true for you guys too, let me know. I know that it's consistent along many immigrant homes, but using fast food as a reward, like if it's like an exciting time, like, okay, you deserve to get the stop at McDonald's on the way home. Like if you came shopping and if you're well behaved at Rona and you don't go pushing each other on those carts and like going crazy, then we'll stop at McDonald's. You can get a Happy Meal. And I know it's the same thing for my partner Maylat. Is like, yeah, it was like, there's actually I know it's not just an immigrant thing, because a comedian John Mulaney, he was talking about how he's talking about that Rona trip actually. because I had that same experience where my dad would go to the hardware store and we just go like we'd have so much fun, like just pushing each other around on the big carts and stuff. But he talks about that experience about how they messed around in Rona, and then at the end of it, they were like begging him to go to like him and his brothers, right? And this is John Mulaney speaking, and he was like, he's like, okay, I'll take you guys to McDonald's or whatever. And people are like, McDonald's. The kids are going like they're high, McDonald's, and they're pulling up, and they're like it reaches the peak of anticipation. And the dad pulls up, and this is his finishing, story. And he pulls up to the speaker, and he says, "Hi, can I get one regular coffee?" And then it just pulls through, and then John is like, "And that is the most badass thing I've ever seen anyone do." Like coffee is like the antithesis of happiness for a child, right? And he pulled up, he ordered himself one coffee and then left. And the kids were like broken, right? Yeah. But that idea of using it as a reward, and now I know it's not just an immigrant thing, it's like, it's common, of using it as a reward system where if you're good, then we'll go to McDonald's, is like, why would that even work? Why would that even work? Unless it was created in the child from the parents as well of like, that's like good shit. That's like given to good people and make you feel happy, and the happy meal and all that stuff, right? Like it's so direct. The happy meal, it has nothing to do with the food.
Fucked.
Yeah,
we don't do any kind of rewarding in our house.
Yeah,
we just don't do it. Like it's just, I mean, you guys, some of you have been here. Like it just doesn't exist. It's not a thing.
Because that is like brainwashing in a
right
negative way.
It is brainwashing because it just leads to like what you're talking about there with the McDonald's.
So then what would you suggest is for our listeners and viewers, what would you suggest? Like, oh, then what would your kid act on? Like, aren't you always being just rewarded and avoiding pain and going for pleasure? Isn't that what humans do? That's the fundamental drivers of human.
Kids should get a good feeling from playing and running around and talking to you and learning about things. Why do they need it? Okay. If in your life, what makes you feel happy is McDonald's and otherwise you don't really feel happy, like, well, you need to reevaluate what's going on a moment to moment basis in your life. You know what I mean? Like if your kids,
it's actually true. It's actually true. Like I know
I'm not being facetious,
right now, but it's actually
true.
I'm
serious. Like if your kids are like, I need to have McDonald's to feel happy. That's why I'm saying, like with our kids with the Chick-fil-A thing, when we were like, we're not going to do it anymore, we're just going to make it at home. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like a sense of loss or anything on their part. You could see there was no begging. And that's not to say like if we're out and it's an option, because it's just one of the few fast food that we will go to. There's really no others except for if it's like another chicken place, right? But generally speaking, and it's like we said, not very often. But my point is, if we're out and it's like an option and it's convenient or whatever, we're not going to be like, nope, we don't do Chick-fil-A in this house anymore. That's not the point. It's just like hey, we're not going to impulse it as it's like we have to do it each week. You know what I mean? Like just because we did it in the past.
It's Friday.
It's
Friday.
Right.
Today's your day. Yeah.
Right. But like on Tuesdays, we have Taco Tuesdays. But you know what? We have sometimes Taco Thursdays.
Yeah.
Instead, like it doesn't have to be on a Tuesday or whatever. Just sometimes it falls on that because of our schedule and when things are happening and so forth.
And
right?
so the cognitive or the conflict comes in when it's like we as society members, I say we because I speak to us, I consider myself just part of humanity. And if I'm accepting it, or
I don't think anyone else feels that way about it though, Asif.
Yeah, I know. but so it's like,
okay, I'm just saying for the future, you don't have to clarify that you're human for our listeners. I'm pretty sure that
I thought they would spot me out. Okay. So what we end up doing is programming our children to do things based off reward or pleasure and pain and all that stuff. And then later on, as they grow up, we'll say like, why don't you listen to me? Why don't you just do what I say? Like, and my mom would always say, why can't you just do things because you see that it would be like good for the home? Like, why wouldn't you just pick up after yourself because you see that it would contribute to the family? And within myself, I would just feel fucked up. I'd be like, I guess I'm just an awful person. I honestly used to believe as a teenager, I was just a piece of shit because my room was messy. I was just a piece of shit because I didn't naturally want to do the dishes to make mama happy and, give back to mom because she carried me for 9 months and all that stuff. Right. All the guilt. Right. So I'd be super guilty because I was doing stuff out of guilt And because it was like a risk reward thing, well, what gave me more reward in the moment was like playing video games. And
But you were trained to go for dopamine hits.
exactly.
That's what
And
McDonald's is doing.
I'm like, well, how come supporting my mom doesn't give me dopamine hits? So going back to Cameron.
Well, hold on, one more thing real quick. But I just want to add this in before we move on from the McDonald's thing. That it's just like with the Chick-fil-A. It doesn't mean you can't ever have a McDonald's or a Chick-fil-A. But the challenge though, is that how does McDonald's market? They market in a way to exploit that. So the problem is if you get your child hooked on McDonald's, anything that they use with their branding, well, guess what? There's probably going to be a lot of kids who didn't know about Travis Scott that are now going to be influenced by Travis Scott because they like McDonald's.
Yeah.
And I don't know much about Travis Scott, but I know he's not giving any kind of message that's the best. It's just a bunch of bullshit. That's why it's popular, right? But do you see what I'm saying? Meaning it's just like with anything else. That's why our kids don't watch any TV, like TV shows generally or stuff like that. We watch YouTube things like, like Seneca likes watching videos
How to build an artificial intelligent robot that can do your groceries.
Well, like we're watching a lot of videos about raising farm animals and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
Like an actual family who has a farm and they're talking about how they're raising these animals, and we watch stuff like that, and they like that. And I enjoy it too, and we're learning stuff, right? But what I was going to get at is when you impulse them with things that are branded, the problem is when those brands are used later, it'll then influence them.
Exactly.
It's like why, I mean, it's not the only reason why, but just to illustrate the point, like why I'm not they don't play with Star Wars things and all this stuff. You know what I mean? Because then you're going to go over here to Disney that's got the Star Wars, and they're like this new Disney Star Wars thing where they're like, hey, how come how come girls can't be, fucking Jedis or whatever? And then suddenly like they're brainwashing them with like critical race theory. You know what I mean? And you're like, what the hell is going on here? And so that's literally what's happening. That's what Disney's done is they've got Star Wars and then they put all the woke stuff in there. And now you've got all these children. They're doing the same thing with the NBA and the sports. I was talking to this kid that I one of my clients here, and he was telling me about I was asking him something about like, what he's been up to since school started or whatever. And he was saying he was going to be watching like the Rockets game or something like that, And I was like, for the first 20 minutes, he's just going to be sitting there being brainwashed by Black Lives Matter stuff.
You said that?
I don't know if there's no, I was just considering that. I didn't say
okay.
It was just like following up on something. But the point is I just was chit-chatting with him, right? Mm-hmm. My point is I'm like, yeah, so his parents are letting him basically sit there and be brainwashed by Black Lives Matter. But do they have a choice at this point if he's like 12 or 13 or however old he is, right? Because what are they going to say to him? Oh, you can't watch NBA anymore. So he's impulsed with, I like NBA. It's a part of my identity, sports, all that stuff. So I just get everything else that comes along with it. And that's part of the brainwashing thing. You know what I'm saying? Like literally everybody who's afraid of brainwashing, if you're watching sports right now, you're getting brainwashed by all this stuff just through repetition. Because you may say, I don't agree with it, so I can watch it. I don't agree with it. But chances are, I mean, if you're not using the tools that we have in terms of self-forgiveness in these points and understanding how to remove these images from yourself, it's going in there. Yeah. And especially, how are you feeling when you're watching a sports game?
Elevated or like emotional.
More.
So even more so.
Right? I do want to, so I want to play devil's advocate here for just a little bit. Not that I care anything for Black Lives Matter at all. You guys know my position on that.
You think Black lives don't matter? Yes, we know.
that's
it. You hate Black
if it's not clear, that's what I was saying. But
isn't that interesting though? That's the implication, isn't it? If you say I don't agree with Black Lives Matter, it's like, well, then they don't matter.
Right.
You're
right.
Supremacist, yeah.
No, if you are thinking that's what I'm saying, you need to go check out the Black Lives Matter website and be able to read through it. And you know what's funny is I'm saying that, and I know people are going to go and read that, and they're going to be like, I don't see anything wrong with this.
Well, I don't understand the problem. They're just wanting to include everybody. What are you talking about?
Anyway.
But they're missing context. But
yeah. Yeah, they are. But the point that I was going to bring up Well, now I forgot. I don't know.
You're playing devil's advocate.
Something about devil's
That's
advocate.
That's right. Is
I
people
think
would
you were the
say,
You
devil's
already sound like
advocate
the devil
because-
already,
yeah,
Drake.
exactly.
Just keep talking.
No. Let's keep cutting him off before something can forget again.
No, you know what's funny is I went to the museum. So you guys know I used to do like all this touring with students and everything, bring them to all these different museums and just show them, you know, the major cities in the U.S. Well, one of the museums, which is now no longer, it was called the Newseum, right? And in the Newseum, it was basically how the news media has played a role in our history and basically like it was a lot of propaganda for reinforcing these old stories that had been, you know, that your parents maybe remember and they're like, oh yeah, that's good. You know, you got to learn about that. Right. But what's interesting and the point that I'm playing devil's advocate here is they would say it's the responsibility of the, I guess the athletes or the celebrities or whomever to share their ideologies or their beliefs with the general public. And so that is their platform where they can do that. And so essentially, you know, somebody looking at these athletes doing that within the NBA, supporting Black Lives Matter, they might go, well, that's where they should be doing that. You know, that's their platform to speak out about these injustices that, you know, are happening or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you, I guess you want people to do what's best, but a lot of people believe that that is what's best, or they believe that they're doing it or they're going about it in the best way. Right.
Let me play devil's advocate on your devil's advocate.
Ooh.
Angel's advocate.
Devil's advocate inception.
Devil squared.
If there was a basketball player, NBA player who was like, hey, I think police should be respected in terms of their job and what their role is in our society. I actually support, you know, President Trump, and I like his politics and so forth, and I think he's a really great guy. And I think Joe Biden is weird and creepy, and I think Kamala Harris is fake, and I think that Black Lives Matter is, you know, misrepresenting what it's really about, and it's
really
putting
like
people in a
Who is this?
it's putting people in a position where they can't have a rational disagreement without being immediately labeled as racist, and not even be able to talk about any kind of statistics or facts or even look at it openly because you're immediately, you know, if you're saying those things, what would happen to that NBA player?
He'd
It
be
would
hated.
get banned.
He'd be
Get kicked
hated
off the
for
team
sure.
or something.
Right. So the idea, because what you're being say, the devil's advocate. Okay. If you were a lawyer, okay, and you had a guy who you were defending who molested a 3-year-old, and it was like they caught it on video, they saw it, he did it, he premeditated it, and it was like all planned out, and the guy said he has no remorse, and if he gets let out, he'll do it again. What's your job as that lawyer?
Put that guy in jail.
No, the defense.
That's what
as
your
his
job
defense
should
lawyer.
be.
Defend him.
As his defense lawyer.
As his defense lawyer, you're technically hired to defend that person and keep him out of jail. But any responsible
And what kind of
citizen,
right. But I mean, it's like if it was clear cut, like no, it's not acceptable. Why should that be defended? But if he's
Shouldn't.
really good, couldn't he potentially even get that guy let out? And wouldn't he be going for as much as possible, every little inch he can get of that guy retaining his freedom and so forth?
Yeah, it'd be terrible though.
Right. That's the devil's advocate. You know what I'm saying? Like, meaning, I'm not saying you're doing this, but it's like the people who would argue that, like genuinely argue that point you were saying, they're not being honest about all the points. Because they're saying like, oh, literally any NBA player is free to speak his mind.
Like,
and
use
retain
your
his
platform.
position. He's
Say
going to
whatever
be
you
able
like.
to retain his platform if he speaks what he actually agrees with, because that's not going to happen. And so the other thing to look at is do most of the people who are supporting those things openly as celebrities actually agree with it? Actually, like they actually understand it and they fully understand. No. Like they're handed a script essentially. And they said, you're going to say this, you're going to stand for this, or you don't get to be in your position. In fact, think of it even more like this. Maybe there's never a conversation where it's like, you got to read this script, but it's like they're given that platform because all the way along they've proven that they'll be willing to do the right points. You know what I mean? Like you can see like, okay, that guy, we're going to offer him the next level of whatever of platform because we can see he's in alignment with what we want.
Yeah.
Or he's willing to say whatever the fuck is popular at the time that everyone else is peer pressuring everyone to say.
Yeah.
There is no actual. So in other words, the NBA players and the other people who are supporting that stuff are literally just participating in brainwashing.
Yeah.
And then there's the peer pressure of anybody who would go against it.
That's
And they've proven that they've been brainwashed because they get to that level, so then
That's
they
what
can
I'm
have that the influence to them.
Yeah.
Promote
Because
the
did
brainwashing.
they get to that level of their own accord?
no.
Because why? Okay, let me ask you a question. Why, if there was no advertising and there was no branding and there was literally nothing that you could sell based on the NBA players playing the NBA games and championship, all that stuff, would it even exist?
No.
No.
So what group of people has more eyes on them than the NBA and the Major League Baseball and football and so forth?
What do you-
Advertisers.
I mean?
What is the question?
Meaning, what group of people has more eyes on them than those people? No one.
Oh, okay.
They command the attention of everybody.
Yeah.
So it's the highest level. It's like the Olympics of marketing. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, if you're like, I want to go to the Olympics, how good of a runner do you have to be?
You got to be the best.
So what kind of people, in terms of the people who want to influence our perception and market to us, what level of effectiveness do you think the people are at who are behind the NBA and so forth?
Oh, wow.
Like, you think it's just like random businesses, like your local barbershop or a fucking gas station is like, I can advertise on the NBA. No, it's the top of the fucking top of competitiveness. Those are the people who are using that to influence people.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard the amounts of money paid for a Super Bowl advertisement?
Yeah.
How much?
Yeah.
Like millions and millions and millions for
Like a minute or something, or 30
like
seconds.
yeah, exactly, like 15-second advertising. That's on one day.
Right.
Right, on one day for hours.
Average cost of a 30-second ad raised to 5.25 million
Wow.
For the Super Bowl, or just generally speaking?
for the Super Bowl.
Super Bowl. Yeah. One day. One day.
Because how many people are watching?
Yeah.
Exactly. And think about the state that people are in when they're at that point, and how they kind of like, it has become this iconic thing where they put a lot more energy into that point of like the best advertisements being the Super Bowl advertisements. And that, you see that stuff before, guys? It's like funnier or like more like captivating or whatever.
How excited do people get just about the Super Bowl?
Yeah. Just about those ads. Yeah.
And like, or just the ads themselves, but I mean,
It's literally just the ads.
But I mean, even just the game, the whole
But yeah,
thing.
the
And
game,
it's like,
teams. Yeah.
why does any of it matter?
Hey. On that note, do you know what's happening in sports right now, Cameron?
Like, is there some breaking news?
How they're filling the stands?
Oh yeah, with the virtual crowd.
Yeah, did we talk about that?
I don't think so, but I
What
just
does
follow
it
all
even
this
look
stuff.
like? Like a bunch of laptops sitting around?
No, it's
Yeah.
just like basically the image of, my little box right here and me
It's like a
going like,
cutout.
yeah.
Oh yeah, it's like literal like.
And also, I think in another league, like that might be for basketball, and I think in soccer, you can pay to have cutouts of yourself in the stand. Now, who would you have to be in order to spend? It's not $5 for that, right?
Yeah.
Especially for the lower, in camera shots. Who would you
Well,
have to be to spend?
Wait till Travis
100
Scott says he wants to do it.
Oh, and how much? And I want to do it in this seat, C1.
Yeah.
It's like, how much do you think B1 and D1 is going to go for? Right.
But this is an example of the elite literally just preparing you for like you don't exist anymore.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
we're
Like just
replacing
some
you.
avatar of yourself.
No, but what I'm saying is like you're not going to have a job. We're replacing you. We're replacing you with robots.
Mhm.
It's like a subconscious messaging. Wow. What did you find, Mitch? How many people view that?
Well, how many people view the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I thought you were looking it up.
So I was looking up because I had heard, I think it was from Gary Vee. He was talking about how esports gets more viewers than the Super Bowl. Here we go. Yep.
It's esports.
Esports is like people playing video games and you watching people playing video.
League
So
of
it's not even
Legends.
real.
Oh, okay.
As if
It's
the sports
so
is
many
real.
levels of not real.
Yeah.
Like imagine
on YouTube,
imagine there's basketball and then there's people playing NBA 2K20, and we're watching those people play that game.
Yeah, we'd rather watch the
Yeah.
2K20.
And you're paying to see it.
And then we're going to be watching people controlling a robot through VR playing NBA 2K20.
there's more fans in the stadium at the virtual NBA 2K game competition than there are in the stands of the actual people playing the basketball games.
Mhm.
It's like literally everything is backwards.
Yeah, it's just so fucked. But hey, this is where we come in, right?
So I want
To
to
find the people who.
back.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Mitch. Sorry.
Well,
Mike.
just to find the people who are fed up with that and not okay with that, because that's just the most idiotic thing I think I've ever heard, is to just totally be okay with, oh, all right, well, yeah, I'll just get replaced with my avatar and just doing me. It's like it's like psychopathic. So
here's
go ahead,
here's,
Asif.
here's the sorry. My internet's a little bit jumpy. I apologize for that. Here's the one of the most uncomfortable questions that you could ask somebody. What is your purpose? Most challenging, right? Most challenging
To
question you could ask
consume.
somebody. But and I know it's a hard question because I had to go through that too. I had to visit that many times before I actually clarified that for myself. Before I was walking process for a certain amount of time where I was actually able to overcome what comes naturally to me or my brainwashing. And so right now, if you're listening to this, what is your purpose? Time's up. If you didn't start thinking of what your purpose is and be like, oh, this is what my purpose is. Or if you acknowledge, self-honestly that, okay, I never really defined a purpose for myself. Or if your purpose is just to do what you're doing, like a purpose isn't, my purpose right now is to like do this podcast. And yeah, like that's how it manifests as what you're doing right now. But in terms of why you're living your life, what you're putting your life force towards supporting, what is your purpose? I know that it's likely that most people, you don't have a purpose that you've set out for yourself. If you haven't chosen your purpose, you still have a purpose. It just wasn't decided by you. And why we are making this podcast is going back to like, hey, Cameron, what do you use to, how would Max and Seneca know what to do if they're not fueled by pain and pleasure, reward and all that stuff? Everyone is fueled by or makes decisions based off pain and pleasure. But our point is that that's based on your brainwashing because, playing with Lego can give you pleasure. Hitting your sister can give you pleasure. There's many things, anything can give you pleasure. It just depends on what you're wired for. It just depends on what you gotten brainwashed with. And the point being that the sooner you acknowledge that you are 100% definitely brainwashed, the sooner you can take advantage of that fact. Start investigating, okay, how was I brainwashed? How do I brainwash myself the way I want to be brainwashed?
No, it's not how you want to be.
Okay.
It's what's best.
Exactly. And the reason...
Be clear, right? Because
that's a good
point.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Where if you haven't realized that doing what's best or best for all doesn't mean you have to sacrifice anything, actually. Like if you haven't realized that doing what's best for all is in your best interest, then you're still just brainwashed. for something that doesn't even actually benefit you. And this is why at the very beginning, when I was like, hey, like, where do you guys think the brainwashing is happening and things like that? And Drake had said this point. The way he said it was like, by brainwashing, do you mean like people accepting beliefs that aren't actually best for them, but they think they are? They think the belief is best for them? It's a really important point, because what we're suggesting is a lot of the things that you do, a lot of the things that you believe in, a lot of the things that you partake in that like gives you pleasure is actually the thing that's fucking you up, and that's supporting you to stay like completely paralyzed in being able to step out of what you're already programmed for. Can you share something else?
Oh, in the chat, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
not
wow.
relevant. I was just sharing it for you guys for later, but
Okay.
but the reason I clarified that point about it's not just about what you want is because
That's important.
it's like what you want is just a part of your brainwashing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we are all within the context of a system that is brainwashing us to believe that we just have to focus on survival only, and that there will never be enough, and we have to fight and compete, and whatever we get, that's our reward. You know, it's just like it's playing into that whole thing. Like, it's our reward for what we did. You know, and if you work hard, you'll get rewarded. But the people who, it's like, it's not about people who are lazy get rewarded in the system or something, but you can have somebody who works hard all day mowing lawns, and that's working really hard, and they're not going to get rewarded like the guy who works really hard doing business deals and stuff like that, where they're making hundreds of millions of dollars. They work just as hard. There's a difference in their vocabulary, there's a difference in their education level, but who has a greater responsibility to step up and to change the system? You see what I mean? Because this guy, because of his education level, will never get to that point. You say, well, you can do it at any age and all this stuff. No. If you're not if you're not a vice president by the time you're 27 or whatever the number is, like, you're not going to get there. It's not going to happen.
The colonel, the guy who made KFC, he did it at age 70 or whatever. You know, there's all these, there's this Facebook post of like Tina Fey only became a famous actor when she was like 40. Like Oprah was still working at this place when she was 30. Like the Colonel Sanders, is that the guy who made KFC?
Colonel Sandals.
Sandals, yeah, only wear sandals, wore sandals. He was like sleeping in his car at like 60. It's like, there's a reason that we're being given these ideas of like, this person, they still made it when they were super old.
But okay, have you ever I mean, you guys have played video games, right? When you're in a video game, what's that? When you're playing a video game, a certain part of the story happens. And you're like, whoa, so cool, I didn't see that coming, or wow, blah, 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 whatever. But do you think the person who designed the computer game is like, holy shit, I can't believe that happened?
No.
And then if another person plays the game, the same thing's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So what if Colonel Sanders, any of these guys, people, women, whoever it is, who are like, have these success stories, right? What if it's like a computer game? Meaning it was already designed to be that way. You could design a computer game so it looks like it happens randomly. Because how many people are sleeping in their car when they're 60 and are out there pitching their business and all this stuff? Do you think he was the only one ever that did that, that tried to do that?
No.
So for how many people that followed the exact same formula, it didn't work out for?
99.999%.
Yeah.
You know? And then if that's the case, then what you're really arguing, I know you're not arguing this because you're just bringing it up as everyone uses this as an example. It's like, oh, well, Richard Branson grew up in poverty and his mom left him out in the field when he was 6 years old and he had to walk home for 6 hours and all that stuff. So should we just systematically do that to every child then?
No.
Like, that doesn't make sense. Why couldn't you just directly teach them the stuff they need to learn? The reason why is because it happens randomly. And then suddenly it's like, oh, look, there's somebody who's figured it out. Let's do what he's doing. But if everybody, how can everybody create McDonald's?
They
You know what I mean?
You can't. There can only be one McDonald's.
There can only
There
be
can't.
one.
And what does it cost for a Travis Scott meal? $6? If you're paying $6 for a hamburger and fries and a drink,
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
you're not getting real food. you know. And if you go, I'll share this with you guys. If you go on the McDonald's thing, if you go to, let's see, where was it? Was it on education opportunities? I was on somewhere, and I clicked on our food. It was like our food. So I clicked on it, and it's like the first thing before it gives you information is this woman, and she's like, you know, a relatively attractive looking person, and they like have a box of fries, and they're like putting it in their mouth and like feeling so good. That's the first thing they hit you with when you click on it. It's not like information. It's image. It's about feeling good. That is not how that food makes you feel. Like if you could actually hear your cells in your body when you put that food in your mouth, they're like, no, fuck, here comes the pain. You know what I mean? That's the physical reality of it. Of course, your feelings are good because you've trained them to like respond to like that combination of chemicals, which is why they're putting them in there. But it's not actually best for you. And I mean, do you think Bill Gates is eating McDonald's every day?
No.
It's like, give me a break. But they'll support things and they'll do partnerships. And it's like they're doing all this good in the world and everything. Meanwhile, if you work at McDonald's, your life is shit. You're only working there because you don't have a good education. So
and in 5 years, you're gone.
And in 5 years, you're replaced by an automated kiosk. You know? So there's going to be people who listen to what we're saying and everything we've been saying and just be like, well, no, because the system is the way it is. They'll make all kinds of reasons and justifications for it. But that's not, again, who we're looking for. We're looking for people who are like, yeah, this makes sense, you know, because if your response to everything is just, well, it's just the way it is and it'll work out or somebody will take care of it, then you're just not going to be a part of the solution. You know what I mean? And so we can't convince anybody. It's a matter. Oh, there you found it. Yeah. Our food. Look at that picture.
Can you share that? Can you share that real quick?
Huh?
Can somebody share your screen so people can see it?
Sure.
As in, why not just put a picture
Wow,
of
she is so happy.
Yeah,
Oh,
Like, don't
look
you
at
wanna
the
feel like
sun
that?
on her hair?
that's
Wow.
heaven right there. The white
Somebody
light.
share
of
it.
heaven.
She's
Somebody
not going
share
to be
it.
that happy in 3 minutes.
Have you ever seen anyone look like that when they're at McDonald's?
When I go to the bathroom, I look like that after I eat McDonald's.
Wait, did somebody share it yet?
No. I've got like these ads coming up.
Well, below it says, what's in your food? Find out what makes our ingredients special.
Do you want to know?
Don't. Okay.
There we go.
Anyways.
Hey,
There you go.
were you gonna say
This
don't
is
share it?
brainwashing.
Yeah, it's fine.
To be very clear. That is just
But you see what I'm
wow.
saying? It's just like there's no honesty, self-honesty within any of it, you know. And that's not to say you can't ever have a McDonald's or something, because the human body is very adaptable. You can have some McDonald's. It's not gonna, you know, at the end of the day, you're gonna die anyways because everything isn't best anyways. So it's not about being. I'm not saying you need to be like some kind of, you know, monk or something, sitting there never enjoying yourself or anything. There's a context, and you can do things within balance, but. Think about the person who is excited to go get the Travis Scott meal. That's like a thing in their life that matters.
Think about the people who are like, oh my God, the Green Bay Packers lost. And I'm so mad. Like, I had some rugby friends back in the day who would be like, I'm so fucking pissed. I'm like, what's wrong? He's like, the fucking Packers lost. I'm like, dude.
What if you like went to your friend's house and he was like, I'm so fucking pissed right now. And you're like, what's going on? I'm like, fucking 6.8 million children died of fucking preventable causes last year. I'm just so pissed about it. And you're like, okay, yeah, all right. I can see why you're pissed about that.
Yeah.
But instead you get mad because a thing that has arbitrary value. And it's like, why do you like Wisconsin? Is it because they're the best team? Or Green Bay or whatever the fuck it is. Like, why do you like that team? Because they are the best team, or is it just because that's where you were born, or you lived halfway between both states and that's the one you rooted for because your dad is always rooting for the other one? It's like so arbitrary, but it gets you so emotional to where you'll drive across the country for it. You'll pay $100 for the season tickets or whatever.
There was in Toronto, right? It was like the first time the Raptors made it to the playoffs. And I'm telling you, what was going on at that time for, I don't know if it was Canadians, but I'm in Ottawa, right? And I remember I was at like a pool bar, like playing billiards pool, with like some soccer friends, right? and we're watching. I think it was with some soccer friends, I remember, but we're watching the Raptors, and I was like, everybody was so into it. Like it, like literally, I was like, yeah, yeah, they scored, and then they have to do it again, like the next point, like you know what I mean. But at the end of the game, it was like a buzzer beater, right? And it was literally like the other team was up by 1 point, and there was like the Toronto Raptors were down, and they had the ball, and I was like, oh my god, it would be so fucking funny to watch everybody's face if they lose this game. It was like game 3. It wasn't the final game.
You're like, please lose.
but I know I wasn't doing that. I was just like, oh man, it'd be so funny to see how everybody reacts. And whoever like took the buzzer beater to win the game, and he misses it, right? And everybody's like, oh, like we're gonna win, and then he misses it, right? And I promise you that a couple of my friends that we were spending the night together, I think we went for a walk after, one or two of them was like, they weren't the same after that. They were just like, I just can't believe, like that fucked up their night. It fucked up their night of spending time together with people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, imagine what it's like for esports. You know what I mean? Like, oh no, like the League of Legends character that I like the most died like first round or whatever. Like my favorite Call of Duty player.
It's not Tom Ford or who the fuck it is that's Spider-Man anymore. It's Toby McDanielson or some shit, and you're like, I can't believe that they let that guy be Spider-Man.
The fact that
And imagine, no, imagine
Or
this.
they ruined the Star Wars franchise.
Imagine this. That night is your last night of your life, and like, and you die, and you get a split second, and you look at who you were, and you realize, holy shit, I wasn't even I wasn't even here. I was lost in my mind about something that did not freaking matter.
Wow.
And that's who I was with my one precious life. Imagine that.
Oh, that's a really
And
good point.
like I mentioned something about committing to like the best purpose. But if you look at sacrifice is giving up something that you place value on. So if you just change what you value, you don't have to sacrifice anything to commit to the highest purpose, because that's going to do what's best for everyone. But people always feel like, I'm sacrificing, I have to give up everything to become self-perfected or whatever it is, right? But
It's a really good point.
like, if you just shift values, it's not really a sacrifice in many ways.
So
Actually,
And either way, you're sacrificing.
yeah, you're sacrificing right now every day. But you're just sacrificing for a bunch of bullshit that doesn't matter.
To be
And for
able
that-
to watch the sports, you have to go to work every day to get money to pay for the tickets or to buy the cable or the season pass or to go out to the bar to drink with your friends or whatever and do it. It's like you're literally using up all of your time on this earth so you can go participate in that activity. And even if they won and you got that high point, what do you got to do next? Like literally, how long is it going to last?
For the next game.
a week
Yeah.
at most.
So that's why they do it again the next year,
Yeah.
and it's like, it's literally like you're a sucker. There's it's like you're like the guy who believes that, oh, I'm going to go in the casino and get the jackpot. You know what I mean? Like I somehow,
It's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
it's the same thing.
And then you don't
it's
hit the
like-
jackpot. Then you're like, fuck, oh man, I really thought I was gonna get it.
And then imagine you do hit the jackpot and it's like $500 or something. And you're like, yeah, I fucking made $500. It's like, no, you spent $1,000 in the slot machines to hit that $500 jackpot.
Mhm.
And it's just about a feeling.
Mhm.
And
It's all it is.
for people listening, regardless of your age, I wanted to bring up something that Cameron had mentioned earlier, is like, how much of your life is either just doing what your parents, and again, this has to be a point that you reflect on. This is why it doesn't work by just listening to something or reading something, is that you're not actually taking this material and seeing how it applies to your life. And like, for example, when we make like fun of the point of somebody's life getting fucked up over a basketball game and then they die and they look back at their life, like, how does that relate to you as an individual? I'm looking at how that relates to my life. Like, whoa, what are the things in my life that if I did them and just like got swept up in that and I were to die, or in other words, seriously reflect on how valuable was that to my life in this world, that I'd be like, whoa, I'm completely retarded. I need to look at that for myself. And the point is to, how do you do that? Going back to what Kian was saying, how do you change your values? First, acknowledge you have no fucking idea. You have no idea how to change your values. That's why you've never done it. That's why you don't even think it's possible to do it. That's why you think that you put so much value in individuality, is just because what you believe is individuality is just a bunch of bullshit that was programmed into you from your environment. That's not what makes you special. And in order to see that, where do you go find those tools? I hope you know if you've been listening to this podcast. And for anybody listening, no matter what your age, consider how much of what you do is either just because your parents did it, or you're living in reaction to your parents. And a great example of that is wanting to do things, and that if somebody were to tell you not to, you would say, you're just trying to control me. Any point within us where we're like, oh, you're just saying that because you're trying to control me, or you're just trying to sell me, or something like that, you're not actually looking at what actually makes sense. Because everybody has that point. Everybody got super controlled, but not everybody, this is to varying degrees, but we all got controlled by our parents. We all got told bullshit. And so now we don't trust our own ability to see through bullshit. So we're really fearful of looking at new information. And also we don't want to feel like we're not free. So we'll do a bunch of shit and never question anything, which is that, in other words, we'll adhere to our brainwashing that keeps us imprisoned, because rather than question it, we more so want to feel as if we're free, even if it's causing a bunch of shitty consequences. And Cameron, you know that Tim Pool podcast that you shared earlier? He tells this really cool experiment. I don't know if you got that point of that, because I want to apply it in a specific context here, where he's talking about there was an experiment where they put a step ladder. You guys know what I'm talking about with the five chimps? Yeah. So they put a step ladder in a room, and they put fruit on top. And what they would do is they put 5 chimps in a room, and whenever one chimp would climb the ladder to get the fruit, right? Whenever one chimp would start climbing the ladder, they would hose all of the shrimp. I'm going to say all shrimps. The shrimps. Yeah, the chimps. They would hose all the chimps, right? And eventually, after they did that a number of times, any chimp would go to climb the ladder to get the fruit, and then all the chimps would get hosed, right? Eventually, when a chimp went to go climb the ladder, they all started beating that chimp up, because they know that if he climbs the ladder, then we're all going to get hosed, right? Like, stop doing that. We're going to get hosed. And that's an example of giving the slaves the whips to whip each other, right? Not just give the slave the whip and they start whipping themselves. Give the slaves whip and they'll all whip each other. Be like, hey, make sure you keep working because we're all going to get in trouble, right? And the coolest part of that story is what they would do is they would take out one of the chimps, put in a new chimp. And what would that chimp do? Try to climb the ladder. And then all the chimps would beat up that chimp. And then that chimp would learn to not climb the ladder, to a point where they one by one would swap out all the chimps. They would all get beat up to learn not to climb the ladder, to the point where they decided to stop hosing down the chimps. But what would still happen? Anytime a chimp went to go climb the ladder, that chimp would get the shit beaten out of him, even though there was no longer a consequence to climbing the ladder, right? And so the point within that is, what's the solution to that? What's the solution that makes us separate from just being a chimp? It's the fact that we can, go ahead.
We can reason.
We can reason, right? That lies within our ability to question everything. Like, we have to look back at why we do anything. And sorry, you as an individual, I'll say we, but then you might not take it literally for yourself. It's like, you have to look back at yourself about why you make all the decisions that you make. And if that's overwhelming, then just look at what you're doing, the biggest things. Because if you're not willing to look at that, and you've completely lost sight of where that point was created inside of you, then you'll never be able to see the things that we're talking about. You'll never be able to see, oh, like what they're talking about, and in regards to how that applies to my life. Wow, I do a bunch of shit that's not beneficial for me. But because I get a good feeling out of it in the moment, I don't consider the long-term consequences of it. And it's just like total bullshit. Like, what created that point inside of you in the first place? I know a lot of people are walking the point of smoking weed. A lot of people are walking the point of alcohol. It's like, let's be honest. Why did you start that stuff in the first place? I think all of us smoked weed and drank, right?
I smoked, but I didn't inhale.
I only smoked water. Yeah, I never drank it though.
Okay, fair enough. I respect that. So you smoked alcohol and drank weed, right?
That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay. And so that has become an automated point where it's like, that's just what people do. If you don't do it, you're kind of fucking lame. Like, what are you, just some loser who doesn't drink? Like, who are you to have to say that? Like, what are you fighting for? What are you arguing for to want to protect that, my right to alcohol? And you'll see that whenever we're talking about changing politics, whenever we're talking about parenting children, whenever we're talking about why you should do something, we try to be as clear as possible that it'll never work through trying to impose some law that mandates that everybody does it, right? It'll never work by banning weed. It'll never work. Because humans have this uncanny ability to just find a way to express whatever the fuck they want. They have a way of being able to, whatever it is they want, if they really want it, they'll get it. Right? And this is what's taught in like success circles and stuff like that. You make the decision of what you want and you go get it, except we do that for like dumb shit. And the point being that that's why we pirate software and like stream the game online, even though we're supposed to pay for it or whatever the case may be. And the point of that is none of this, you don't have to do any of this. In terms of the brainwashing point, you don't have to do any of this. In fact, it'll never work if you don't see why it would make sense for you to do what's best. And the final point I want to make with that is we've been so brainwashed to judge people on what they believe in rather than their ability to change their beliefs. As in, the part with whatever you believe in, that doesn't belong to you. That was completely determined by your environment when you were a kid. If you think that you're thinking for yourself, you're totally fucked. Like, you're totally fucked. And again, this is something I only realized recently, what critical thinking actually is. To be able to look past not just the headline, but the article and looking at the context of why that news article was created, or the context of why that video was released, or whatever the case may be, is who cares about what you believe in? What's your ability to question what you believe in? Because what you believe in was just given to you by your parents, was given to you by feeling forced, which is brainwashing, right? We think force is like, you must do it, and people yelling at you and like beating you or something like that. Force is subconsciously feeling like if you don't believe this, you won't fit in. That's force. Force is thinking that, oh shit, if I don't do this, then I won't be able to keep my friends. That's force. That's not coming from you. And it's really important because that's the shitty part of brainwashing, is you being afraid of being socially shamed, which we all feel to a degree. But if that's what's determining what you do, then what the fuck? As in, if you can't question your beliefs and you get offended and you start calling other people names and shit on people for being an asshole while you shit on people, like, that guy's such a fucking asshole, I hate him. We only ever hate people that we don't know. It's like, how could you hate Trump? Because he's fucking up everybody's lives. And okay, Ooh, I know people who are still having a good life in the US. Is that fair to say? Right? Where the point being that if you're not willing to actually question yourself out of basically the fear being, I don't want to feel bad, and I don't want to accept that I'm actually kind of dumb, then you're dumb. And that's just the truth of what I had to face within myself. Is like, oh my God, I'm not as smart as I thought I was. In fact, I'm actually pretty stupid. I believe in a bunch of dumb shit, and I do a bunch of dumb shit. Therefore, and there's always going to be new things that are brought to my awareness that are stupid things that I'm doing. So it's not about being humble. It's about the result that humility is supposed to bring you. As in, what you do is stop trying to fight against the thing that you're fearful of, because that's what is allowing the thing that you're fearful of to come through you. You being afraid of brainwashing or afraid of being dumb or wanting to be smart is keeping you as a total idiot, because you're never actually willing to question what you've accepted many years ago. Just like the chimps. Did that come full circle? That was nice.
Yeah. That's pretty good. I think you mentioned the tools really briefly, but just to be really clear, where can you find those tools? Self-perfected or self-perfected.com.
Mm.
And you can see, you can get a glimpse, if you haven't already, get a glimpse of what you can actually do to start your reasoning ability. Because we're not just saying just take it on faith and just start trying to then reason for yourself, because that, it's as if you're in your programming and you go, oh, that sounds really nice, I'm just going to do that.
Oh,
Right?
can I make one point on that? Just
Go
real
ahead.
quick. I'll question people like, what is your purpose? And I'll challenge them, hey, like you should write out your purpose, right? And take any given individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so crazy how coincidental it is that their purpose usually winds up being exactly what they're doing. Like the first time I wrote out my purpose, I remember sitting in Toronto in 2016 and like my life being like, oh God, I don't know what to do. What should I do next? And it just happened to be exactly the exact characteristics of this job I really wanted.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, fuck, I'm just writing down all the characteristics of this job that I want. And I didn't realize for like a while that I was literally just describing this thing that I wanted that was right in front of me. That was the only thing that I could see at the time.
Yeah.
So it's always interesting how, you know, when you first attempt to define your purpose, it always just seems to be the thing that you already want. It always just seems to be the thing that you're already doing.
Yeah. That's interesting, because, you know, if you were to like sign up for a new job or whatever, and they're giving you this exam beforehand to see if you're compatible with the job, one of those questions is like they ask you about like, what traits do you see like as part of your purpose? And you basically, in order to get the job, if you're smart, you just line up, you know, what you know you're supposed to be doing at that job.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Oh,
yeah,
you know.
exactly. Here. But, you know, that kind of brings up the question, how did you change that? Or did you change that?
Mm.
Are you still like lining up your purpose with the traits of what you think you want to have? Or how are you going about it now? What's different?
Completely clear now. Purpose is no longer an issue. It was an issue for a long time in terms of when I started questioning it. I was like, what is my purpose? But I know a lot of...
What was the process of you going from like, this is my purpose, or I think this is my purpose, or this is the first time I've ever even considered what is my purpose, on a level that's like, you know, well, you can't really know your purpose. I don't know how many people I've talked to. They're just like, well, you just don't know. Nobody knows what the purpose of life is, right?
Isn't that convenient for the people who like give you a purpose?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right?
For the people who don't know what their purpose is, it's like, yeah.
And also for those who like you end up, your purpose
Oh,
becomes just to serve them.
yeah.
It's like you've gotten convinced that you're just not supposed to, like, like it's about like how, like about experiences, right?
Yeah.
But the point being that just to preface that is like, I know that a lot of the times people will be like, oh, you're just saying that because like that's what you do. I had a pretty fucking, like, life was going pretty good for me before I started doing all this and started speaking up and speaking out and all that. And I think that's one of the main things that Cameron had expressed about Mitch. It was like, Mitch, it seemed like everything in your life was like cool. Like you had it pretty good. Like what you were doing before all of this, it was like pretty sweet. Why would you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, the actual process that I went through was just being super skeptical and weirded out by all of this. And like, again, being totally brainwashed. Like as soon as you say anything, I'm just like, automatically the result of my brainwashing was like to fight anything that like tried to change what I'm already doing. But it was literally just over time using Techno Tutor, doing DIP Lite, and having the relationship with you guys where I could just tell you when I'm judging you, or just tell you when I'm like, I think that's bullshit, or I think that's stupid. Like, or like, why would you want to, but doing it from a perspective of like, I'm not just trying to like prove you wrong. I'm like, here's what's going on. Did you go through that at all? And then because of your ability to explain things like Drake, even Kian, Cameron, and there's, Avery, a lot of people we were talking to at the time, a lot of people from the group before as well, where we all go through that skepticism. We all go through that, I don't really want to be part of the group. Like, I don't want to, like, listening to this stuff is good enough for me, but it's not. Because the only thing that actually changed anything for me was like, it wasn't one moment where I was like, purpose, what's my purpose? And then I figured it out. It was like, I set up bullshit purposes for myself multiple times until I was using the DIP Lite process and working through what I was saying of, well, I'm doing a lot of things just in reaction to my parents or just as my parents were doing in a very general context where if you looked at my life, you wouldn't be able to figure it out. That's why the second principle on destiny is self-honesty. You're not going to be able to figure this out just by listening to what we have to say. In fact, we don't want you to figure it out by just listening to what we have to say. We're here to sell you on the fact that your life could be way better because you probably think that all the pain you go through and all the emotional turmoil is part of life. Where it is from a certain perspective, but that was manufactured. And if you watch Century of the Self, just the first part, it's 1 hour. You'll see why it was manufactured. And it's a stupid reason. And it's a reason where if you took responsibility for it, your life would get way better. If you're like, oh, that is a stupid reason, I'm going to start like removing those parts of me. But the problem is you just don't know how to do that. That's the whole point of Self-Perfected. That's the whole point of the DIP Lite process, is because I was looking at all the points where I was just making decisions or setting out purposes that is like, it's super limited. It's like, I have to make sure I don't do the thing that my parents wanted for me, and make sure that like I do what people think I'm good at, which is that I can already see in front of me. And it was acting. I just became an actor, and it was fun and it was great and all that stuff. But then I was just realizing how temporary that happiness was, where the longest lasting happiness I've ever felt, or the longest lasting fulfillment, came from when I've just been challenging myself to do things like this. Because the truth is, I've already gotten a bunch of backlashes for the stuff that I post. Not because it was bad stuff. It's just because people didn't agree, just because it was pushing up against people's brainwashing. But that's what's going to happen, is you're going to fight for your own limitations, to believe in things that you want to believe in because questioning them is too hard, to do things that if you had the option. Ken always does this point. He has this question. He always says, if I gave you $30,000 a month, every single month, and the only stipulation was you can't be doing what you do now for work, you could never go back to it. You can't be doing what you're doing. You're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to ever do it again. But you can do anything else you want. You can do, literally the only thing is you just have to quit whatever you're doing right now and do something else for money, right? Would you take it? And if your answer is yes, what I'm suggesting to you is, and it's okay, it's not a point of judgment, but the point to acknowledge within it is, yeah, your only purpose here is still to just make money and nothing else. Just like anybody who's talking about a sweet system that you can use at the casino to make a bunch of money, right? Because me and Kian had that phase too, and we were totally fucked at that time. We made money from casinos, and we were totally fucked up at that time. And who we actually were, sucked ass. Just to be clear.
That's cool.
It's really cool. I mean, I guess the real point that people should consider is you're only here for a limited amount of time. Everything that you think you want and desire has been programmed into you. That's your brainwashing. And so do you really want to get to the end of your life and not have questioned any of it? And then realize at the end that the consequence of your life, of the end of your life, and what you get after that is a result of what you accepted in this life. And so that's why we keep saying and bringing it back to, it's more like we're just giving you perspective, and then you take the tools that we're suggesting and then you go apply those for yourself. Because it's not about us, telling everybody what they should think and so forth. We're just giving our perspective in terms of what makes sense to us. But everybody has to come to these points for themselves. And that's the fundamental difference between brainwashing versus what we're suggesting. What we're suggesting is that you use the tools to look at what is your programming, what is your beliefs, what is it that you accept, and then examine that and see, if I have this starting point and other people have this starting point, but if I have it, is it going to produce a world that's best for me and for everyone else or not? And therefore, can I then change it? And that's what the tools are all about. It's not about teaching you what to believe or what to think. And so it's interesting because if you look at the definition of brainwashing, people are afraid of being influenced by other people. And people could level that same claim at us and use that to say, well, yeah, I'm not going to listen to you because you're just trying to brainwash people. And it's like, no, we're showing you what the tools are so you can look at your programming and then see, what do you want to keep? What do you want to discard? What do you want to change? And that's the opposite of brainwashing, because it's you doing the influencing, right? That last thing, no, I wasn't clicking around, or maybe I was, but I thought I had myself muted. Oh,
No, you didn't.
I was clicking on stuff, but I thought I was muted. But I posted something in here. I was looking for this. So it's the Task Force on Deceptive and Indirect Methods of Persuasion and Control, some APA, American Psychological Association. Wow. It's interesting because they explained that they did this whole investigation and they found, it's not really conclusive whether groups like religions and so forth use manipulative, deceptive techniques to influence people's thinking. And it's like, can't you just use common sense? Do you know what I mean? Do you really need a university study to figure that out? Is it not obvious? And let me put it this way. If it didn't work, if there was no such thing as deceptive, manipulative tactics and stuff, why would there be marketing? Why would they spend that much money on a Super Bowl ad? But of course the system doesn't want to admit that cults and everybody uses it, because then you can easily see, wait, but isn't the school system just the same thing as like a church or a religion or anything else? And isn't the corporations and everybody doing this? It's like, yeah, everyone's doing it. You brainwash children when they're young. That's called giving them a language. It's called them observing your behavior. And then they're going to interact in the world based on that. So the primary thing you can do is for yourself, go back to you being a child and question, what are all those things that you've accepted so far in your life, beliefs, etc., using the processes that we're suggesting. And then do that for your children too, meaning prevent that from happening if you don't have kids, or support your kids to develop the vocabulary where they could take that point on later in life if they're already teenagers or middle school and they're not going to listen to you anymore, right? The point is to develop them to be able to have a clear vocabulary where they can see clearly what things mean and what they don't mean and what they should imply logically and so forth, right? So they're not just reacting to information based on an emotional bias. Because the moment you're doing that and you're resisting being brainwashed, you're defending your own brainwashing. So if you find yourself resisting or reacting, you're already brainwashed. So if you're afraid of being brainwashed, you're already brainwashed. I'm not afraid of it. You guys, no one's going to be able to change my mind about whether we should have a world that's best for all. It's not possible. You can't change my mind about it. It's not a belief. It's not a desire. It's not a hope. It's not a fear. It's common sense. But I've developed the ability to reason that out for myself and see it clearly. And when you can see it clearly, you can't change your mind. And that's why I have no fear about it. I have no fear of someone changing my mind about it. I'm not concerned about it. But if you believe something and you're holding it on faith, you're always trying to protect and defend yourself from it because you've imbued it with energy. It gives you a feeling. You don't want to lose it, right? Maybe it gives you a feeling of security. Maybe it gives you a feeling of hope or whatever it is. You don't want to lose it. And you know you haven't reasoned it out. So it is a fragile sort of state that you're in with that belief. So you don't want anyone to question you, right? So whenever you see yourself being afraid of brainwashing, like if you're even fearing what we're saying and saying, whoa, it sounds like brainwashing, you're already brainwashed. So you might as well go into it and consider it and realize that we're offering people the tools that are going to support you to not be able to be influenced by others. That's the whole point, is for you to think for yourself. That's the only way to create a world that's best for all. Any other way, and if you look at the way the world is moving right now, it's moving towards extreme control from the top down because people can't be trusted to think for themselves. The system has programmed us all to be consumers, but then we're about to be replaced by robots. That means no more jobs. So then where do we get the money to consume the stuff the robots are going to produce? Do you see the problem? These riots that we're seeing is just the beginning. That's the real reason for it. It's not really about racism or any other stuff. It's just preparing us to get used to the fact that people are going to be very pissed very soon because they can't make ends meet. That's what's really coming. That's why we're saying we need to have a system that gives everybody what they need. So then at least there's no reason to go rioting. Like if every Black person in America had everything they needed, and every Hispanic person, every whatever you want to call it, person of color, all that stuff, why would anyone say that racism is a problem? Because how can someone who's a different race take an advantage of you if you don't need anything from them? Do you see what I mean? And think about this. If everybody had what they needed, would anyone need to steal anything? So would police be necessary to protect property? So if you just remove the police and you don't protect property, well, guess what? You're not going to have a home to live in because the company's not going to build the homes and they're not going to be insured because they know that they're just going to be stolen or taken down or whatever. So there's not going to be, in the current context of the system, no one's going to build homes anymore. No one's going to rent out apartments. So we have to work with the system, but then realize it's not enough. It's not good enough the way it is. We have to then go beyond that. And that's really where this whole discussion today comes into play, because you're going to have to challenge all of those points where you think it's not possible, where you think you'd rather do something else with your life, where you think something else is more valuable. And if you're still stuck on, I'm just smoking weed and watching sports and listening to music all day and doing nothing with my time that's of any value whatsoever for myself or others, you're fucked. And you're next on the chopping block. Like, it's not like your life is secure. It's not. You're not doing anything to secure it. And a lot of people, there's nothing they can do. So that's why it takes those who can hear us to really step up and go into the system and make sure that we can make the changes that's going to support everybody, because that's going to support us and our children and so forth as well. Any other thoughts, guys?
Okay.
All right, I gotta go.
The last thing I'd say.
Travis Scott meals waiting for me.
The last thing I would say is, if you haven't checked out these tools yet, don't be the shitty kind of brainwashed to just see this as entertainment, and you're just programmed to, oh yeah, I just listen to my stuff. I just listen to stuff when I do my dishes or run or whatever. It's like, no, there's a reason why you should be listening to this, and there's a reason why you should use these tools. That if you're just listening to what comes natural to you, that's your brainwashing. And you'll actually have to use your will, use your free will to decide to do something different, which is actually take action and go to the website and look at the tools and look at the group and join the group. And the second point is, if now you're just reacting, no, I'm not going to do it just because you told me to do it, you're definitely fucked. Don't let that be the source of your decision making. That's all.
Sweet.
Well said, everybody.
We'll leave it at that. Have a great
Cool.
one.
Bye, guys.
See y'all next time.
See ya.